Man, I posted your speech, man, just the end of it and stuff, man. A lot of people been hitting me up, man, like, hey, how can I get involved? This is great. You know, a lot of people, Worthington alumni we went to school with. So, um, I think people really are glad that you're, sharing your views and your point of, reference on it. So, keep
Yeah,
doing it, man. Keep doing it.
that's what's up, man. I appreciate that. It was so dope of you to come out, man. I know it was short notice. It was short notice for me too. Yeah, man, I felt great after that. You know what I mean? I felt just like so empowered. I felt so good for those kids there. Like, what if we would have saw something like that when we were younger? Like, what? It's just I just want to contribute to that.
That's exactly what my pops was saying because they walked over to they're downtown, so they walked over across the street a few times and were just walking with the protesters and stuff at the state house, and he was just blown away by, just how much diversity was there with people that were protesting. Um, you know, him talking about seeing people that weren't black holding up the, black power sign and stuff. It was just for him, man. Being born in the '50s and stuff, seeing it is it's groundbreaking.
It is, man. It's interesting because I've been talking to my grandpa more, and like, as time goes on, he'll tell me more stories of like what it was like for him to come up, and the stories just get worse and worse. It seems like you kind of hide the ones that pain you the worst. Um, it's just sad. It's really sad, but I think we are making progress, man. And I think it continues with people just caring enough to want to go that direction.
Yeah, and it just shows you, even though we may have not always been able to see eye to eye with some of the folks we went to school with, but when it comes to basic things like racism, that a lot of people are against it.
Yeah,
Um,
man.
it
Yeah.
doesn't mean they're necessarily comfortable around black people of other um, demographics, but they still are just not. They're not. They're anti-racism. And
Right.
when they're confronted with that choice, man, they're going to make the right one. And that sometimes gets lost in some of this. We just always think that anybody, and, just because it's about white cops that have did the police brutality, we think that that may be all people, but it's a small demographic of folks that have those extremist views.
There are good people and there are bad people, man. There are people who respect others and there are people who don't. And that's, essentially what it comes down to.
Yeah, yeah.
Brian, did you already speak at your school? Is that what you guys are talking about, or is that something you got
Hmm.
going on later?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
did.
yep, it was earlier today. A good friend of ours that we went to high school with reached out to me, had been seeing some of the stuff I posted on Facebook and, asked if I would speak at this event. And, I was afraid at first, man. I've been in my house, there's a pandemic going on. And I was almost ready to turn it down. And I don't know. I kind of thought about it for a minute, and I was like, if I'm not willing to risk it for this, for freedom, for justice, for all people, what's the point? What's the point of continuing to go on if I'm not willing to do that? And so I left my house for the first time since March, and I went out there and I talked to my
Wow.
people. You know,
Wow, so you hadn't really truly been out. 'Cause I know people say it, but in your case, it really was like that first time getting out there, man. That's big.
it was real, man. My lung capacity is really impacted, man. I don't breathe as well as I used to, so uh, it's a risk for me, but it's worth it, man.
How was the event? Were you able to go too, Lawrence? Or
Oh yeah, we went. So
mm.
me, Morgan, Kwani, Pete, Nadal, his
Oh, y'all were
girl.
deep in there. Dang.
So much love, man.
Hey, that's love, man.
Yeah.
That's what's up.
It was at our high school, so it was like, hey, we got to come show up, and support. And I think that Danley did a great job, and
Thank
I
you.
think he talked about the love he received from it. I think one of the things was also really inspiring and gives you hope is just hearing the young people talk. They had a couple seniors talk, and um, I was just blown away. Like Ryan said, if you would have put me in that position at 18 years old, I don't think I would have been as eloquent. I don't think I would have understood the moment, as well as they do. And it just gives you hope, man. You can tell that things will change because the younger generation
You
for the
remove
better.
the politics of it, because I think that's something everyone tried to turn Parkland into. Man, those kids at Parkland, that was something that really proved to me. I was like,
Yeah,
wow,
I agree.
these kids are
I
mature.
agree.
These kids have a vision. They have a plan.
They
It
out
wasn't
there.
just chaos. You know, it was
Right.
structured, organized.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Honestly, man, that like the whole gun violence, climate change, now this,
Greta,
like you
yeah.
see that they are focused. Like, nope, that's not what it's going. You know what I mean? Because they thinking about it like climate change is an imminent existential threat that they like. Hold on, I got to be here for the next 50.
This
You know
is
what I
my
mean?
house too.
Right, it's my. You feel me?
Yeah.
I love Gen Z. At first, I was worried about them.
Yeah, man.
stepped up.
I think you get that with every generation, man. It's interesting to see the development. I guess the interesting question would be is, what do you guys think has kind of got us to this point as society? Like what have been some of the things that have led us to this point where, we are seeing this change happen, yet there is so much tension that's in the air. What's your perspective on that?
Man, that's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
I think one is just the increased focus on diversity. So now I think we've all seen it at a corporate level, right? Where, and I can't speak for everyone, but at least when I came in at Cardinal, there was a increased effort to bring in Black people. They realized they had a problem. They're trying to solve it, and that morphed into more inclusiveness from all perspectives, all demographics, all sexual orientations. So I think that's one thing that's matriculated down to the youth, and they understand that from just growing up. And then two, I think it's some of the maybe like entertainment type stuff. I mean, the culture is completely different now. Even things like music, movie, popular culture. I mean, there's a lot of Black people represented in it. So you grow up seeing that from such a young age. It probably is mind blowing to them. Why would people be racist? We grew up on some of these, these figures and stuff. So I just feel like everything has been completely shifted and has been inclusive of all different backgrounds, and that's why they're not going to stand for anything that's less than that.
I think it's tough for them to hold this vacuum of information now, right? Where they could almost paint this picture and uphold the institutions that have been in place for a long time, through information, right? Like they think about what they taught you in school, right? They didn't teach you any of this stuff. Like they didn't go deep into these topics. Like the civil rights chapter was probably like, man, you probably spent like 2-3 weeks on that. Now, I mean, social media, you can go on there, internet, you can go in there and research anything. And it's like, it's tough for them to keep pushing that same message about like, Black people might fit some stereotype that's not actually really true, right? So that's what I think. I think information, man, information is powerful.
I agree, man. We learn about MLK, you learn about Rosa Parks, you learn about Frederick Douglass, and you learn about George Washington Carver, doing everything with peanuts. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
So, yeah, man. I mean, that's basically it. And so that's kind of all the introduction we got. And even speaking of other cultures like Native Americans, you learn about the Trail of Tears, and that's it. It kind of gets glossed over. It's interesting, man. That's an interesting perspective.
One thing we talked about, and it was like a continuation of the last time we got together, was kind of like our system, the United States of America, what we were founded upon. And a big thing, because I watched Justice and Mercy last night. Like Amazon has this thing going on right now. No, yeah. And I couldn't sleep after that. Then I'm watching the Malcolm X documentary about how he got assassinated, and it's just trying to really understand. And my reason to kind of go into your question was that I think it's about education and understanding our system. Our system really is flawless, but we have to make it work for all of us. Like if we say we're founded upon equality and justice for all, let's hold people accountable to that. And something as simple as like what's going on right now with the civil unrest as it relates to race. I was even thinking, because I was like journaling a little bit, and it's like, the whole, and I was listening to Michael Shea's skit again where he talks about like all lives matter, Black lives matter, that whole, debate everybody's having. Yeah. Well, let's call it all lives matter. I almost want to own that. If all lives matter, cool, let's hold each other accountable. People come back and say white people are killed by the police more often than Black. Well, one, you're a larger percentage of the population, but cool, let's hold them accountable. Why do you want your other citizens to be murdered by the police? Why can't all lives truly matter? And I think until we get everyone to be educated and conscious and understand that, our system is great, but we have to make it work for us. And if it's not, it's time to make changes. And I feel like maybe, I don't know, I'm feeling a surge of optimism right now. And going back to what we talked about the, the younger generation, Gen Z, and people, what they're doing, I think that wave is coming, man. The protests, the amount of people that are out, how peaceful it's getting, I think it's going to be so undeniable. The globe is protesting, man. I saw in Germany, in the UK, it's like the world, they canceled Oktoberfest in Germany, but they came out and drove to say, nah, we got to stop. This is time for change. And it's like, with that kind of imprint, man, I don't know how you can slow that momentum down. But it goes back to, I guess, saying,
Mike, we lost you.
Yeah, Mike, you cut out. Hey, do you all think it's a coincidence that these protests are coming up when it seems like more nationalistic movements have been happening, not only here in America but in a lot of other countries? Because I think I heard similar thing was happening in Brazil, some of these other big countries where that more nationalistic conservative regime has been in power, and now you're starting to see some of this racial undertones bubble back up, and now you're seeing the protests. Do you think that's kind of cause and effect, or what's kind of underlining point on that?
can y'all hear me, or should I switch out my headphones? I'm going to cut you off.
No,
Oh yeah, you're back. You're back.
Okay,
yeah.
perfect. Okay.
Yep.
My bad.
I think that's a very wise question, Pell, and I think it's something that you got to look at in totality, right? Like, there's certain microcosms that happen at a small level. So George Floyd is just a part of a whole other system, right? And there's a lot of other factors that are at play, man. It's a waves of nationalism that's been happening for a while, from Boris Johnson in the UK, different leaders and stuff like that. And you could see that there are countries that are starkly different than that. Like, if you look at France with Macron, or even Trudeau up in Canada, you could see that people are like, no, that's actually what we're like. That's what we like. That's what we want to shoot for. A lot more socialist in principles, man. We have the ability now to solve some of these large existential threats. And I think the young generation is kind of coming out and say, how are we going to be nationalist in our mindset and only focus on here when our problems are getting bigger and bigger, right? So I do think it's definitely that, man. We just needed something to serve as a catalyst. And I think, police brutality is one of those things.
Yeah.
I agree, man. And, you talked about education. I think that's a lot of it. So one thing I'm realizing in all of this is, though things like inventions and ideas and technology get contributed to society, it doesn't happen at the same rate for everyone. Therefore, not everyone knows what tools and mechanisms exist for us to solve these problems. So until we all kind of have a basic level understanding of kind of where we really at today, we won't ever agree, because our perspective is going to be so limited based on what we're capable of knowing. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that you give 40 hours a week to a job, sometimes 80 hours a week to a job. You don't really have time to really understand the world. So I think education is huge, man. That's a great call out.
How about social media? That's I think, to me, that's the biggest difference in information versus the past generations. Even to a big degree, us, right? We don't think of ourselves that old, but we didn't have any Facebook type platform back then. Now the MySpace and stuff started happening when we were in high school, so a lot more views, and you were able to start seeing that. But a lot of these kids have grown up where there's always been a Facebook, there's always been a Twitter and stuff. So the access to information is completely different speed. So they're able to stay more informed on stuff. Do you think that's kind of helping with the rise and everything as well?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like, social media is playing a positive role, but then there's also some negatives to social media as well. And I think we have to start to address some of those things. I think, Jack over at Twitter, I think he's doing a lot better job than somebody like Zuckerberg, right?
Absolutely.
You can't just push misinformation. Keep it real. If you want to solve big problems, if you really want to get us to a place where we're solving existential crisis, climate change, maintaining democracy and things like that, you can't just push false information, man. That's unfair to the civilization, man. That's unfair to democracy to do that, man. You got to push the truth, man, and let's have a conversation about the truth. So I think, I think younger people are more informed, more willing to be open-minded to certain things, and they don't get just trapped into a bubble, because social media allows for you to kind of, step outside of it if you choose to, right? But I think there's a danger that comes along with it as well that I'm a little bit nervous with, right? Like, I'm hopeful, but I will say this, man, like, in reading things in history, it is a toxic relationship that Black people have always had with Lady Liberty, man. It hasn't always just been super joyful and then things just like a happy ending. So I'll be honest, man, I'm kind of on the edge of my seat, like waiting for something to happen, if I'm being honest. I'm hopeful, but I'm cautiously optimistic.
Always prepared no matter which direction, man. Yeah. And I think that's the approach you have to take to every aspect of life. That's a conversation I had with someone yesterday in the baseball world, and it's almost like, as I'm thinking about, again, trying to take it to something that's relevant, like happening right now, is that California has got a very different approach. Like, even how you guys had that event in Ohio, Ryan, we're still in lockdown. Like, we're still, it amazes me y'all aren't wearing masks. And this isn't even about the political. It's just, it interests me the polarization in different demographics and different communities, how it's being handled so differently. But here right now, it's like, amateur sports are not really being played. Other states are. And I think that's just kind of telling, because it proves that you really don't know where it's going to go. Like, are we going to take door number one, whereas it's, this civil unrest is going to lead to drastic change, or is it going to lead to, revolt or other, negative consequences? And I think as long as you stay prepared, no matter where we can go, I think that's important. But I wanted to go back to something which y'all were saying about social media that I think might sound somewhat controversial, but I was having a conversation with Adriana about it yesterday, and just thinking about like all the things you see in the news platforms and what's going on with like Facebook, and I guess the accountability piece, and that, I think it goes back to what we talked about with the Constitution, First Amendment, freedom of speech, Second Amendment, right to bear arms. My view on the Constitution is that it's a living, breathing document. When they said you had free speech, that was at a time where it was word of mouth. I'm going to say this to you, I'm going to say that to this person. How fast is the news going to travel? Now, when you've got people that can impact hundreds of millions of people by the click of a few fingers, I think that that's dangerous. I think that it's dangerous that you have information out there that can be just willfully, ignorantly wrong and misinforming people, and allowing individuals to be able to do that. I think that's something that personally, and I want to hear you guys' conversation on, is that, how do you feel? Like, I think that, the fact that free speech protects, me being able to speak to you. And I know there's so many different types of speech, but do you feel like we're in a form where it's now that, like, because of the different ways we can communicate, that the individuals that are the businesses that are the platforms should have a bit of policing and regulation to essentially ensure that wrong information that we know is inaccurate is not out there and being consumed by, by the population?
Yeah, man. I think truth is important. I think truth is essential in us getting to a place that is ideal. And I tell you what, man, if you think about America from, as a concept, I love America. I think it is the greatest country in the world.
Right.
The problem is, at one point, America considered me 3/5 of a person, and those things.
Property prior to that.
And property prior to that. And those things run deep, man. And how educated do you think someone is that was brought over from a different country, not allowed to read books or anything like that, but just made to work? What kind of education are they going to be able to pass down? And this compounds over time. This happens when you have like things like the black codes. This happens when you have things like redlining. So there are some real problems that, used to exist in America, and we still face some of those today. It's just a matter of how can we, educate people enough so that we can rid ourselves of these problems and begin to move forward. What do you guys think?
I know I'm kind of late. I kind of jumped in and kind of trying to pick up what y'all was speaking on. But just like off the top of my head, when thinking about social media and speaking of truth, I think, yes, it's been like a gift and a curse. It's proliferated information, and it's allowed people to be able to seek out information. I'm saying social media and the internet. I'm kind of both things. Is that they've been able to grow and evolve. And I think it's interesting to see like whose responsibility is it to make sure those platforms serve truth? Is it society, or is it those platforms themselves, or is it that we say that under our society as being a democratic republic, it's supposedly that it only works if the citizens themselves are informed and know how to seek truth, right? So it's like, do the platforms and the society institutions have to drill down truth, or do we have to teach people how to properly seek truth? And I think those are two different approaches, right? So I think for me personally, I like the fact that there's access to information. And I think I like the ability for people to be able to have a voice with the internet and social platforms. And I think if we try to regulate it too much, it may become a hindrance, and it may have unintended consequences. So I think the best way may to be is to educate people how to properly source information, how to properly vet stuff, vet stories that they hear. Cause like, it's so crazy. Like, for every one story on truth you see on the social media, it may be 3 fake stories, man. It's crazy. Like,
Yeah,
it's so crazy.
twisted facts. Yeah,
Yeah,
articles that are twisted,
yeah.
or have a leading agenda from the organizations. That I think I agree, about the free speech part, but I think once people got smart enough to start pushing narratives that really just weren't truthful at all on
Mm.
social media, I think that's when, especially if you're talking about public figures that lead nations, worlds, you almost have to step in at some point and say, hey, this is not based on anything factual.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This
It's a
happens.
scary
Right.
precedent.
Yeah, that's
And,
true. It's like
and,
that. Yeah.
and honestly, Mike, to your point, like I'm looking here and it says like, free speech is not just something that's unfettered, right? Where you could just say whatever, right? There are restrictions to free speech. Like they're saying like a few narrow categories of speech that are not protected from government restrictions are like incitement, defamation, fraud, obscenity, things like child pornography, fighting words, and threats. And they said the government may forbid incitement speech directed at inciting or producing imminent lawless action, right? So it's like, that's why I've always actually had a problem when I look at some of Trump's tweets and I'm like, hold up, like, you know what I mean? Like these should have been restricted. Like one, they're just, a lot of them are just blatant patent lies. Like you're just literally just lying.
And
two, it's like, bro, you trying to incite something, like.
Yeah, I was gonna say incitement for sure.
I'm like, if my only way of like picking up information, and if I'm holding you to the office of the presidency, the highest law in the land, then you should be held at even a higher standard. You know what I mean?
Like think about it, man. Like if you had a friend that lied to you thousands of times, like I feel like you would call it way before that. You would call the friendship before they even probably got to 10 or 5. You know what I mean? And there's a difference between, ignorance and learning new information versus just, kind of doubling down on falsities,
Well, and it's interesting you talk about lies, and that's why, again, kind of a lot of things that I consume in the car and from a news standpoint is NPR, and it makes me think of a book that was coming out. They were interviewing this woman, and essentially she was talking about some of the lies that Trump has, stated, going back to his inauguration being the largest crowd and getting other people to lie. And basically the thing is that it isn't about the lie, it's about the power dynamic that you can actually make others lie on your behalf. Because we know it isn't true. It's the fact that people are consuming information that isn't true, but it's because of the power that's being wielded at the same time. It does make it scary. And I think, LA, you do bring up a great point, and I think it is tough. I'm, going to an ultimate blanket, restriction will be, it's not the answer. But I think it's both. Like you said, it's education, but it's also some form of regulation that has to happen, because it's not like the education is going to instantly, people are going to turn on and like have a high level of reading and intellectual an ability to comprehend what they're reading. Not the materials are going to be out there. So I feel like they have to work hand in hand because it's dangerous. It almost feels like we're in an information war where you can put things out there that aren't true.
Info
and people,
wars.
Yeah, when like the man got people to drink poison, like it's. And not even, I don't even want to skew it like only about Trump. It could go anyway. Like I found that myself too, where like I was watching those Occupy Democracy videos, and it's always like they're trying to make fun of people. They're trying to make you think a certain way. And that's what's scary. And I think another NPR special I heard months ago was that there was a journalist who set up like a new Facebook account and essentially started like following certain things and subscribing. And this is someone who works in this industry, in this profession, and you would think could guard their mind. He even started to be skewed by the material he was seeing on social media and on the internet. And if someone who you would think would be better suited than the average individual, it's clearly a problem. And like, I'm not, maybe ultimate regulation isn't it, but something needs to be done or it's going to continue.
Yeah.
Mike,
I feel like it's just so hard to regulate truth though. Like, like.
Is it really, y'all?
I mean, initially, but retrospectively you can, but like.
But like if somebody said something and then denies it, like, if you have
Oh
video,
man.
like how is it hard to, you know what I mean? Like it's stuff like that where like it's been blatant examples where like you have said this. No, I didn't say this. Fake news.
Mm.
And
No,
you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So I have the
you know what I'm
tape.
saying?
have
Like, we
you on
have video.
video.
You say
Yeah,
this.
You literally said it yesterday.
You signed
Sir,
the
we have the
transcript.
video.
yeah, shit when you're on video. I was talking about more like fake news, like fake news and people pushing out stories and stuff where like some of it is factual and they blend in enough like fake shit
Yeah,
to get you to
that's
believe
tough.
it, like that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. Like
Yeah, I would say one example of that is like blaming this on China, right? The coronavirus, right?
mhm.
Because it is some grains of truth there that is like tough to kind of refute, right?
Mhm.
Like, yeah, it did come from China, right? I'm not saying that like they were malicious in their attempt to do so, but it's tough to kind of like paint a story against it when they're like, oh, blame China, blame China, blame China. And it's like, honestly, you're just doing that to divert from the fact that you handled this so poorly, bro. It's like,
Right.
Did it come from a
It's
lab?
Safe.
That's the question.
right.
That's the
There's
thing. Like,
evidence that it came from a lab. Just like
Didn't
there's
he say it's an
evidence.
impeachment? To, like block his ability to
Yeah,
handle
yeah.
this
He said
too?
he
Like,
was
come
being
on,
impeached, so he couldn't handle this. He couldn't walk and chew gum. Bro, like, and honestly, look, I'm the type that I'll be hypercritical against all politicians because you're a politician and you are up there to be criticized by your people. But at a certain point in time, I don't care, man. I just gotta call a spade a spade. I didn't like the way Obama handled the drone policy, right? I'm okay. I can critique you, but look, you deserve all the smoke that you get.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah. I
You
didn't
deserve
like,
all the smoke you get.
yeah, and like the expansion of spying, like the NSA and stuff like that under Obama. Like, not
Right.
a fan of that at all.
Right,
But,
right.
You know what I mean? But I felt like when I heard him speak on his Zoom speech, he spoke of unity. He spoke of ways to try to reform these things. He didn't talk anything about dominating other people. You know what I mean? And like I just thought it was a
Different
weird,
tone.
yeah, different tone, man. I
Completely
think,
different. Yeah.
yeah,
Or I think sometimes the issue to me is that you have stuff and narratives, lies that are getting put on social media that if they're not regulated, you're literally undermining some of the things that our constitutions built, some of the things that the institutions that make America, you're undermining our intelligence agencies. You're undermining our free media, which is one of the things we pride ourselves on that makes us
Right.
different than other countries, right?
Right. Right.
We always talk about restriction of the media and stuff. So if you allow this stuff to grow on your platform and you don't check it, I think that's where you start running into some of the bigger issues. And that's why I'm glad that like Jack at Twitter,
Right.
I think Snapchat actually said they're not going to take President Trump's account. I'm glad they're doing some of these things. Yeah. I mean, it's big stuff like that where they're actually stepping up to the plate and saying, hey, we do have a social responsibility to make sure there is some type of governance here. And, unfortunately, it sounds like Facebook may not do that. But on the flip side, it's like, look, Facebook is kind of being rewarded for not doing it if you look at their stock price.
Doesn't that seem so problematic too? That like the private industry
perform from a business perspective.
yeah.
No, go ahead, Mike.
Well, I was gonna say it's wild to me. Like normally, it's not the private industry. Like we go back to the whole regulation and deregulation. Private industry normally doesn't want any regulation, but they're the ones. Like it's almost a sad day in America where the private industry has to say, "Hey, no, we have to rein in the leader of the free world." We can't. He's not being held to truth by his own party, by his own government. That we have to have lean on this private institution. Like, what do y'all think about that? Isn't that like going back to like the InfoWars? It's almost like I think it's bigger than that. It's almost like a threat to democracy, a threat to like again going back to the concept of what we stand for. It's exactly like this is wild to me. Like
I mean, I'll be honest, man. I try not to go down too much of the rabbit hole of, kind of the apocalyptic standpoint of it, man. But you see a lot of similarities between this guy and the other authoritarian leaders who have risen to power, man. You continue to lie. You push a very small fraction. People feel like this fraction is actually a larger part of the majority than it really is. Like a lot of people don't think like that. A lot of people aren't beholden to those truths, man. And I think a lot of people in the Republican Party are complicit, right? If you're not willing to call him out, if you're not willing to stand on your 10 toes down, and you worried about re-election, more than democracy, then you're a problem, and we need to vote you out as well. You know what I mean?
I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that politics has now become a team sport, and we're ingrained
Absolutely.
to follow teams. You know, we watch sports and we do these things, and they say don't be a fair weather fan. You know, and so people are sticking to their guns. We're training people to stick to their team no matter what. I think we have to look outside of the two-party system, perhaps in America, and realize that it's time to vet some like real ideas, and that life isn't binary. You know, it's shades of gray. So I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to propose something. Oh, go ahead. My bad, Ellie. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say off of your point, Orion, like I have somebody, a close friend of mine, that's really a big advocate of universal basic income, and Andrew Yang, and some of the topics he's been talking about, because he's essentially saying that a lot of these movements and a lot of the things we're trying to work towards, he essentially said that the best way for racial justice and racial equality in his mind would be universal basic income. Essentially is raising the floor for all of the people in poverty to be able to have access to different opportunities that they would not have ever had, instead of like trying to go through it systematically and try to change all the laws and change all the minds and mindsets of all the judges and all the people who do all the legislation for all of the redlining. That's a big undertaking. But imagine if you gave all people of color, a foot to stand on, essentially, by giving them some universal basic income to help them overcome some of these social injustices. What do y'all think about something like that?
So one criticism that I've seen of something like that is it creates what people like to call a welfare state. And if something is given to you, you become dependent on it and won't pursue of kind of your own merit, and therefore society as a whole becomes complacent. I don't think it's an invalid criticism, but I don't think it's a universal criticism. I think it'll kind of. It seems like you have people who are willing to work hard and pursue their dreams, and you have some people who are just complacent in general. No matter
Yeah.
what the system is. So.
And that was something I said back to him, and I was like, yeah, like capitalism and competition, right? But essentially his said was it's capitalism, but nobody starts at zero, right? So you can still stack chips on top of your pile by working hard, working your ass off, but essentially there's nobody who had the floor that they recently had, right? There's nobody that can't afford to pay for rent. There's nobody who can't pay for groceries. If they're a lazy bum, that's probably all they'll aspire to still. But if they work their ass off, they'll likely become a multimillionaire or billionaire like anyone else. But it's essentially just raising the floor to not be zero anymore. But it's not rewarding hard work. It's still capitalism, but there's just a floor. And he was essentially saying that this money would come from taxing large corporations like Facebook, Amazon, but they would have to become utilities like Google, Amazon. They would essentially have to become public utilities, because we rely on them from infrastructure, small businesses, information. So essentially, if you tax them at a high level, this program could essentially work, because they don't actually right now get taxed the same way. Like they make a lot of money and they don't get taxed on it appropriately. So the money would work from a funding standpoint. So I kind of really didn't have many like, other than like you would have to make them a utility. That was my biggest argument to like it wouldn't work. You have to make like Facebook, Google utilities and Amazon a utility to be able to tax them to fund this universal basic income. Essentially saying the society uses these things, everyone uses these things.
Do you think it would kill the entrepreneurial spirit for a lot of Americans?
Wow, I mean,
If I create something and then they're just gonna tax it to kind of fund everything else, I guess at that, because I'm assuming with what you're talking about a high tax on everything they do.
So essentially, it'd be a threshold, like let's say, of profits of over 100, like 50 billion is would be considered. You would have to flush into this universal basic income tax of a corporation. So it wouldn't really persuade most entrepreneurs because they wouldn't have to worry about paying this tax.
Do any countries have that you maybe you're aware of, or I'm just wondering, like, is there a successful model of that anywhere?
The closest thing I think is like Norway. Like Norway, I think is the closest.
They got a really high tax rate. Yeah.
They got a really high tax rate, and it's promising. But my other argument to him was like the scale. Like America is like 350 million people versus Norway's 10 million or so. So I think just on the scale. But he said like, yeah, you can just tax. Go ahead, Larry.
I'll say this, man. That's why I rocked with Elizabeth Warren on the campaign trail, because she really was speaking truth to stuff. She was like, that 2% tax on every dollar that you make over $5 million. It's like, if you pulling in $5 million for a year in income, you know what I mean? Every dollar that you make over $5 million, we're just going to tax at 2%. And that would pay for a lot of things. And I would say to how you start to distribute those funds is the question that you have. Should we just give everybody a check for $1,000? I would almost argue I would prefer that education is taken care of and healthcare is taken care of, right? Just as these universal things that we feel should be taken care of, because you still might have people who get that $1,000 and still have really bad health, right? Or you get that $1,000 and you still don't have education. So I'd rather those resources go to institutions that, kind of build up the population as a whole.
So more like
not leave it to the
programs.
individual.
So more program. So you want the money to go to the programs and not to the individual.
Community centers, things like that, like public education, public healthcare, and then like community organizations that kind of like have the best intentions in mind for those communities. I would prefer that.
So
and you would want the tax to come from the individual, not corporations?
Oh no, both. I'm
Both?
tax their ass. Tax their ass.
Hold on. I absolutely hate taxes, man. And
Larry preaching the tax.
I'm kind of
Larry about to get tarred and feathered.
I'd be happy if we had a 0% tax, and that feels heartless. But
Damn.
do we trust the government to distribute our wealth, or should we trust ourselves? I think that's a fundamental question. Like, why not allow me to give my power to the causes I want, rather than the government forcibly take away my earnings and distribute them as they will, which, they haven't been so great at doing when you look at things like Social Security. So
that's tough what y'all are really discussing, because I think what I was going to bring up as it relates to like universal income is I know they had something where they tried that here in Stockton, California, and they were like, and maybe it was like 500 and then 1,000, and they did show that it was promising. I think, where I see it standing is that I think the concept does make a lot of sense and I could get behind it, but it's the fundraising. Where do you get it from? Which is kind of going to what you guys were talking about a little bit that I can't say I have a clear answer on. Or also to the next point that you just brought up, Ryan, is, how they should be able to receive it. And kind of Larry's point, like, should they get, unfettered access to it, or should they get, a trust set up, or should they get a 529, or should they get some insurance vehicle? I don't know. I think that the idea is great, and I think that should be where we at least start. And I feel like sometimes, like with any idea, people are just like, no, we don't know how to do it, so we're not going to do it. And I think that's a bad way to look at solving problems. It's
right.
Like, no, why can't we just agree, like, hey, let's explore this a little bit and try to figure it out, And I think that's the one thing that would be helpful, because my stance on it as it goes to like how you raise the funds and how they have to be used. I think that the raising should be, like you said, on corporations and on the individuals. I think we're all part of a society. It's like, if I know my dollar is going to ensure my neighbor doesn't become homeless, because then becoming homeless makes them more likely to have other negative consequences that are going to rely on me in other senses. Like, I think if we could see that collectiveness, but then also having the choice to say, okay, I get to decide where it goes, but also have people that are subject matter experts help us figure it out too. I just think it's tricky. I think people are going to be frustrated, but that'd be my hope, is that we can at least be like, hey, it does make sense, But,
and for the record, man, I believe in philanthropy. I want to help people. I actually find a lot of joy in giving, and often give away too much when I have things. But I just don't like the idea of someone like, forcibly taking it away from me and deciding what to do with it. So I think if I had more say in that process, it would make me a much happier person.
To be honest, I'm right there with you. And that's why, like, I know you guys were texting about the stocks. It's like, that's why personally, I've invested in the stock market once, and it was a terrible experience. Investing in Facebook when it first IPO, had no experience, no knowledge, put 500 in with my mom, my brother, let them just do what they wanted, got scared, and just sold it when it dropped. And then it shot up. And I was like, what? If I'm just going to throw money away, I'm going to throw it at me. Because I'm the same way. I don't like having confidence in the government or anyone. It's like, if I'm going to bet on anyone, I'm going to bet on my own, physical, mental, spiritual abilities over that of anyone else. And I think that's something I look at as my own, personal. I think it's like a strength, if you will. But for most people, I realize also that they're different than me. So some people do maybe want to be, completely no regulation, let the government do whatever they want. But then there's other people that are like, I, have all these conditions. I need someone to hold me up and help me up. And I think that, like, I think it's possible to have a civilization where you can it can balance. It can all be in sync where it's like some people that are here can have this and they can take us here. Some people that are there, like it doesn't have to be, I guess, zero sum. And I think that's the thing that's tough is like, as it goes back to all things about now, it's like everyone wants it to be one way or the other. Like, you know, like, I wonder if there's any Republican that would be out there saying that they're pro-choice. Or they'd be like, no, I can't be pro-choice. I'm a Republican. I have to be. Or vice versa. Or there's a Democrat that's like, I'm pro, what, you know, death penalty or something, you know, just some example like that. I just feel like, I don't know really where I was going with it other than like, I think you can have a personal opinion about a matter and then also what maybe is in the interest of the greater good as well, you know?
Mm.
I feel like it's a slippery slope though, because if you look at it, businesses are great for innovation kind of within their industry, but as far as them being on the forefront of social issues, it almost never happens. They usually, once they'll piggyback on something, once they figure out, okay, this is something that matters. This gets clicks. This is going to be beneficial for us with our, you know, stakeholders and customers and consumers. But they're usually not the first one to step in line and say, oh yeah, we need to solve this issue, right? So
That's like the NFL right
so
now, you know?
yeah, exactly, right. So like now everyone's jumping in and Black Lives Matter and stuff because they
Goodell's
realize
out there like,
this is public sentiment now. This is the consensus that this is what matters. So now everyone's on board and donating money and, you know, having all this great action, but that really came from the people first. So I think that's why it's important for a lot of this stuff to be driven by the people. And I feel like it almost has to happen through the government where we can actually dictate laws, legislations, and stuff like that. And businesses and stuff will fall in line because a lot of these, we could take the chance that Bill Gates, like every billionaire is Bill Gates, but we see right now that everyone isn't. Everyone doesn't really care about a lot of these huge issues and trying to solve pandemics. And, you know, God bless that they're doing that. But if they weren't there, who would really be looking out? You know, somebody donating a couple 30 million here when you're worth 20 billion.
Right.
Is not really moving the needle. So I don't
It's real.
necessarily trust the government that much, but I think I trust them more to use the money wisely than I do these corporations where the philanthropy can sometimes be, and I don't want to call it silly because it's not, but it might not be the most pressing need that we need right now for America. You know what I mean?
Or it could be self-serving at the same time.
I'll say just quickly. I think we could kind of accomplish all the things, right? I feel like we should incentivize people to get into the public sector and really kind of be like, these are the high-priced jobs, right? Whether it's teaching, whether it's, you know, city council members, things like that. Pay them more, incentivize them, hold them to high standards, have our best talent going into those positions to kind of push, you know, us to be better as a society and be more transparent with where the tax dollars are going to. Like, if I could look at an income statement and just be like, okay, my tax dollars went
I agree.
to education,
Like a dashboard.
healthcare,
Exactly.
homelessness, boom, 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 dashboard. Like, honestly, okay, this. And then, honestly, I'm not talking about touching my tax rate. I think my tax rate shouldn't be touched at all. I'm talking about the people that are the ultra wealthy. We tax them a little bit more. We up the capital gains tax. We up the death tax, right? We start touching on some of these other things. These corporate tax rates where they got all these loopholes, close all those loopholes, right? And honestly, and then just start incentivizing people to get into the public sector. Put the smartest people in the public sector. Like, no, the smartest people are in the public sector. The teachers are the smartest people. Like, I think that's how you get there.
Yeah, I think that was a big proponent of universal basic income. It allows people to aspire to go after and achieve the things that they feel they're most suited to do, right? So essentially it's saying it'll empower more people to go into the public sector. It'll inspire more civil servants to do those types of jobs, to have them more of the freedom to do that, rather just feel like they have to go into the corporate or the business world in order to be able to survive or to get these means that they felt like. So that was one of those arguments for that. And I guess I wanted to ask y'all, do y'all think racial equality is possible in America, as long as, you know, I guess poverty and racial, I guess financial inequality, could racial inequality happen before financial equality happened in America?
No.
And I don't think so.
Well, that's interesting because I know me and Ryan both, before you got on LA, talked about how we watched Justice and Mercy last night, which was ironic. And that's the thing, you know, obviously know my background, having a law degree, being an African-American, and even just living in Ohio, which I know obviously you gentlemen still do. I almost think it's about the narrative. And that's something I said before you got on to LA, is that we really have to look at our law and order state and our law and order system, where I forget where the quote came from, but our criminal justice system is supposed to be set up like it was some justice or some, obviously a high up person that was basically saying our system was set up that 100 guilty people should be set free than one innocent person actually being incarcerated. And that's just not the case. I mean,
for-profit prisons, man. For-profit
well,
prisons.
that's part of it. And I know the through line talked about other aspects. Like, there's definitely a lot to it. And the fact that we've got 11% error on people sitting on death row, like that blew. When I saw that stat thing, that was like, I was almost dumbfounded. It's like, going to prison is one thing. Going to prison for life is another thing. Going to prison and knowing that the state is eventually going to kill you is a whole completely other thing in my mind. And I think that part of it is that we have to drastically reform the way that, from a society, how we treat people that are going through a tough time, be it mental, be whatever the issue is. And it's like, I think that's a key component, man. Once we can make it that everyone buys into that, I think that you could have some reform there where you could have equality, but that's the aspect that's probably so closely related to slavery, that is still impacting, the African-American community and all communities. And I think that's something that we're not the only ones locked up, so I think it's something we can get everyone to buy into. We're also not the only ones getting killed by police. Like, we should look at it as like, why are we at all okay with this? And something that's a bit extreme, and it kind of goes into the point I was going to bring up before you pose that, is that in LA County, Los Angeles in general, our police budget is 54% of the city's budget. That blew my mind. It's like, if we're paying
For
that
LA
bill,
specifically, or just kind of on
for
average
LA.
in cities?
I don't
Okay.
think, for LA. Because in LA, PD's been wilding out with these protests, like pepper spraying them and things that I don't necessarily agree with. And so I think that might be the way that you get to that level of equality. And as you look at all the movements, the women's suffrage movement, LGBTQ, it's like, and there goes something we talked about in the thread, is like that unity. And I think until we can unify people around, criminal justice reform, I think that'll create a level of equality. I really do,
I feel like we don't really have a say in a lot of those budgetary type things, like how much is allocated towards
who we
what
vote
cause,
for,
what organization, what, you know what I mean? Like, we vote for people, but then we're literally 5 steps removed from being anywhere able
what they
to
actually
kind of
do.
influence that stuff,
That's the truth.
Yeah, what they do with the money.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's part of the issue, we may vote for a candidate, but how do I know every day that they're on behalf of what we thought they were, or they're making the correct budget allocations and stuff, or they're fighting for the right things when that budget proposal that stuff, we almost can't dictate it, and we're leaving it up to chance with some of the people we have elected.
Yeah, I think that's the case, man. I think transparency to that would be better. A lot of these meetings and things happen like during the weekday when people are working and they don't get a chance to see it. I think Mike brought up an interesting point too, man. How we treat people who have fallen on hard times or made a mistake. The concept of a criminal record interests me because you make one mistake, when you're young, and that follows you essentially for the rest of your life, even if it was like, 2-year offense. If jail is supposed to equate to you paying your debt to society, why then must we strap you with a record that says what your mistake was, and therefore you lose out on job opportunities? You lose out on all these chances at redemption because of this one mistake that you made. And that's kind of why I don't like cancel culture too, unless there's a pattern, of behavior. I think there are differences there, but I don't know, man. I think we don't give people a chance at redemption.
You can never truly be sorry. That's what it feels like,
Right.
Like, how do you pay
never
that debt?
atone for something you did. Yeah.
I just say 2 things on the piece of like equality. Like, honestly, I don't ever expect for us to get to a state of equality, right? I just want it to be equitable, right? I wanted to make sure that we're not intentionally putting things into the system that are marginalizing certain people, right? It should just be free, right? Free competition. We had starting at the same place. So I'm not looking for some like, kind of mythical place of equality. I'm not looking for that. It's just the equity piece. But to the point on like criminal justice, like in the new Jim Crow, the basic premise of that book is just talking about how you can never repay your debt to the society. They're like, you're not eligible for housing, public housing. You're not eligible for Pell Grants. You're not eligible for all of these federal funding type things after you get out. And it's like, if I get out, I'm not eligible for public housing through the state, where am I supposed to go? I ain't got no job.
You can't vote. You can't get a gun.
I can't vote.
You know, you
They
can't
can
get
lose citizenship.
Second Amendment. Yeah. Are you an
Isn't that why like
American?
60% of like people who get out go back in within like a year or two?
That's what I'm
You know,
saying.
like,
Like, of course you do.
And we had it battling fires. We had incarcerated people battling fires too. So it's like, yeah, that. And I think again, that's one reason. Like going to LA's point, like you're probably right, Larry. You're probably, and that's why we had the conversation. I was listening back to it, and like I mentioned that whole thing about all things being equal. They truly just can't. Like I don't think we're too far through. Like our history is too entrenched that it can't be equal, but we can move in a better direction. And I think it's got to be something that's unifying. And if we can make it unifying, because even with what's going on right now, it's like, man, I want to take, I think it's almost marketing. I want to take their phrase. If they want it to be all lives matter, all right, cool. That's what we got to roll with.
I made the argument to somebody the other day. I'm like, look, if y'all agree to say that, okay, if anybody kills anybody, they go to jail immediately. Like, if we can agree on these human truths, then fuck Black Lives Matter. It's all lives matter. If y'all cool with that, if y'all cool with agreeing to these things, we ain't got to say Black Lives Matter not one more day. It's all lives matter.
Really treat it like all lives matter. And I think that's the nuance. That's the nuance that's missing from this conversation is, if you really treated it like all lives matter, you wouldn't have to say Black Lives Matter. You know what I mean? Like,
we're just being specific and say, hey, you forgot that Black Lives Matter too. I think we should add the two at the end of that, right? Black Lives Matter too. So it's essentially we're not saying like all lives don't matter. We're just saying reminding you that Black lives are included in that, right?
Well, have y'all seen that Michael Shea set though, where he goes over that man?
It's funny. It's so good.
I seen people post it. I didn't watch it though.
Well, I've seen the whole, but it's like even that segment. It is so true. It's like how such a low bar that is, and like I got some people still now like on social media talking about the flag and there's other little things where it's like why are we going back? Why we got to make it about things where it's like I don't know why we can't just, and I guess it goes back to what I was trying to say. It's like, it's got to be something about unification. Because if you give anybody any chance, which maybe it's not realistic, people are always going to put a flag in the sand and say, hey, I think this and I think that. But I think it's like, if you can hold somebody accountable to really, you just don't want something good to happen for someone else. Like, why is that? And then we got to play Dr. Phil. Why do you care if this man gets a sandwich? Why do you care if this woman gets a house? Why do you care if they get a job? How does that harm you anyway?
I think people do think it's a zero-sum game for some reason. I think a lot of it has to do with the psychology of taxes, to be honest with you. It feels like things are being taken away from you. But I also think that, I love the flag. Don't get me wrong. It represents America. But I love the citizens of the flag much more than I love the flag. To me, I want to make sure the citizens are taken care of.
Exactly.
That's America to me, is the people,
Yeah, I always found that interesting where, like, with Kaepernick and him kneeling and stuff, it's like people put the monument, people put the posturing up before the actual citizens and what our Constitution is supposed to represent, and not realizing that it hasn't represented everyone equally. It's a simple concept, but people, how could you do that? The flag, and make it about everything else. It's like, listen to what he's saying. Right. America is not a flag. America is based on the people here that we have in the system, that and the concept that we're all supposed to be treated equally, and that has not happened. Like, what is so controversial about that? It's crazy.
Black lives just matter. It just matters.
Yeah. Right. Right. That is crazy that like you find a way to fight against that. But I honestly feel like people feel like if they have to acknowledge that there are things that they may have benefited from in this system over years and years, they take it as almost a slight to them to say like, oh, no, I worked really hard to get here. No, you're trying to take this away from bro, I'm not coming at you. Like, I'm not even, what you did is great. And you've worked really hard. I'm not taking that away from you. But all I'm saying is that America is made up of lots of different types of people. And there's a subgroup of these people that feel like they haven't been afforded the same opportunity as you have. And you may not understand that. And that's cool. But I would just like for you to listen. There's a reason why everyone is talking about Black Lives Matter. There's a reason why it's not okay to just watch people die on film. Like, we don't want to see people dying anymore at the hands of somebody who we're paying tax dollars to.
Right. It's like we just want a chance to live the American dream too. You lived it. Right. We just want to live it too.
Well, think about this variable too. It's like, and if you think about like even going back to the Blue Lives Matter, they know empirical evidence shows killing someone has psychological effects on every human being. Do you want police to have to kill people? Like, don't you want a society where police don't have to go home and have to be drug abusers, family abusers, and all these other things that come along with taking someone's life? Like, I don't know why we can't look at this holistically, 360 view, and figure out like what's better for society. And something that I'm not gonna lie, it was a bit radical because I was up like 2:30 in the morning, man, after Love and Mercy, watching Malcolm and all these things, just thinking.
Wired.
I was just thinking, and it was like, again, this is radical, but as I thought, like, I'm vehemently against the death penalty. Since school, since forever, I'm always going to be, and even as it relates personally, because I've never had someone murder or rape someone I care about. And I can think those are probably two of the biggest things. Like, if someone harmed me in a lot of ways, I could probably come back to. But if you murdered or raped someone that I love, like, that's probably one of those ones where that's a little harder to come back to.
Yeah.
And why do I let the state kill somebody? Again, this is going to be out there, so go with me. But, like, my 2:30, thoughts was that, all right, from a just tax perspective, every perspective, if someone harms someone in my family, I don't want the state to take care of it. If that person's gonna die, it's like then it's being real. Like, if
save some money, save some tax money.
Hey, give us each a knife, give us each a gun, give us each some gloves, and hey, whatever happens, happens. They harm me, if I'm gone, I'm gone. If they're gone, they're gone.
He said bring duels back. He said he's trying to duel.
You bring the duel back.
I slap you with my glove,
Like,
that brings up a good point.
Because why does the state get to decide to electrocute someone 20 years later when I'm like, by then I might not even care,
You think if we had better, and first let me qualify this, I'm not at all blaming any of these tragedies that have happened to anyone that's killed by police on our people, because it has nothing to do with us. It has everything to do with biases and stuff that exist and stereotyping that have got them killed. So I want to make sure I qualify that first. But do you think that our community, if we policed it better, could be in a better position where we don't necessarily need as much? And because
Can you hear him?
I think we lost your
intervention
audio.
of police, because the stuff that's happening where can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Could you mind repeating the question? My fault. I kind of missed the beginning of it when it froze.
Yeah.
Just like the last 20 seconds, maybe what you were saying.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, no, my bad. So see that budgets are being cut from police departments within cities. We see that universities, pro teams and stuff are saying, hey, we're not going to use Minneapolis police right now. We don't want you guys to do our games and provide security and stuff. So do you think it's really incumbent on us to kind of police our neighborhoods, police our cities, and kind of prevent some of these things from happening? Is that the answer moving forward, or less policing kind of by the organization and more by us? Does that get us better results? I'm just trying to think, like, what's the solution moving forward?
I mean, honestly, I was kind of talking to my sister about it, and like one of the big things that cops come out for is like domestic violence, right? So like, what if we use the funds that we were given to the police to like deck out like 5 hotels, right? And just plush spaces, right? And like anytime that any domestic dispute happen, a woman can kind of come there. And this is like a luxury type thing. Like, like you want to come here, like it incentivizes you to come here. And you got a number where somebody will literally just come pick you up, pick you and your kids up, and you go there and you have like counseling resources, you have legal resources and all that stuff. Like, what if we just tried to solve the problems in a different way? Right? So that we were like systematically approaching like the underlying cause of these things, because police are really just looking at like, what is it, like treating some of the symptoms, right? Mm-hmm. They're not treating any of the underlying causes. Like, why can't we treat some of the underlying causes of like, violence on the South Side? Okay, jobs. Okay, let's use those resources and create a whole bunch of job resource centers where people can come there for free. Like, I just feel like there's a better way of are we solving crime? What are we solving, right?
Yeah.
Because if it's solving crime, there got to be a better way than just giving people guns with a whole bunch of military equipment, right? A whole bunch of military equipment and giving them a hell of resources to just patrol around, and they don't even live in a neighborhood. There has to be a better way.
Imagine your surgeon came into the operating room and got an F-16.
Yeah. On top of like what you're saying, I really do agree with that. I think Black community, we could do more, like just instilling values, just, the family values and ourselves do better. But I also think it would be helpful. Imagine this radical thought of imagine community policing of a blend duo of like, you had to live in the city you was a police force for, like, or where people look like you in the cities that they're policing. I know it's kind of a
Right.
radical thought, but imagine if people were tied to the communities that they were policing. They knew. I think that used to be a thing that back in the day where like people used to know the police officers by name. They used to know
Right.
the communities, right? I've seen some cops that went viral. They're trying to do that. I'm trying to be more
Mhm.
community based. Like they're stopping and playing hoops with the kids and
Right.
trying to get to know the people that they actually police. I think
Right.
that like would go tremendously farther. Like police officers actually knew the people. Like Maple Heights Police, where I grew up, I didn't know any Maple Heights police officers
Right.
at all, by name at all, right? They were just police officers. But imagine if they actually knew the families for the people that they police. I
Interacted with
think
the community.
interacted
Yeah.
with the community. I think that would be hugely change some of these issues, and especially if the demographics for the city were equal to the police force, right? If you have maybe you had a heavily black area, maybe we have more black officers, people of color, that can
That's
know
a
them
simple solution.
that know how to talk to those people, know how to interact, and know how to read those environments, right? Know a
Mhm.
little bit of the
Yeah.
code a little bit better, right? I think that's a no-brainer solution to me, right?
Well, you
Think
know
So
how
of how
they say
much
like
they
the
would
concept.
care in that situation. Think of how much, like, if you're not just looking at the situation like, oh, there go these dangerous black guys. If you're looking
Right.
at it like, oh man, I hope that's not Larry, or I hope that's not
Right.
Mike.
Right.
You're gonna react in that situation differently because you don't see them as expendable.
Right. Right. Like imagine if police officers had to get like letters of recommendation from the neighborhood. You know what I mean?
Or
Like
community
imagine that.
interviews. What about interviews where the community got the interview?
Right,
Imagine
right,
that.
right,
Like
right.
you feel me? Like,
Yeah.
nah, you gotta
Pe-
come up here. And
yeah,
like
I like that
imagine if they come into the scene and they dapping everybody up first. Like, yo, what's good, man? What's good? You all right? What's the you feel me?
And
Or
I've met
yeah,
police
kind of.
officers like that. I've met police
Just
officers like
There
that,
are,
and they're the best ones.
that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. Like,
Yeah,
I want the ones that dap you up when they see you.
right.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Well,
agree.
maybe the elbow. We got that Rona going on still.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But no, I just wanted to get back to Pelt's question and his point and what LA said. I agree. It's like revolutionizing how law and order is really what that actually means, in our society. And it goes to the point you brought up, Larry. And that's why I made the joke. Like, if you went into surgery and your surgeon had an M16, it's like, read the room. Bring the right tool for the job. It's like,
Right.
if you coming in with that, you probably going to use that. But if you come in, like you said in that example, with a social worker that's outside, that's like, let me talk to her. What's going? Because she worked in, she's worked in homeless service and domestic violence. Like in those communities, like it is, and that's why I know just from what I've seen and experienced, like I maybe wouldn't have the personality for it. It's like maybe find the people that can actually bring these resources that are needed. And I agree. I think that's drastically, and it's like I never would have thought. Like I remember people were talking about defund the police when it first came out. I was like, that's a little bit crazy. Like I just thought flat out that was crazy. Now I'm like, yeah, maybe so. If it means that they don't have military, weapons and things, like if you have to only have a baton, you're gonna react a little differently. You ain't gonna beat somebody knowing that, hey, I only had this baton. Man, he looked like he squatted about 560 pounds. Maybe I won't flex the baton.
Yeah, I don't believe in this, but y'all think it'd be beneficial? What if we just get rid of guns, though? I know it's kind of a radical thought.
That ain't gonna happen.
But if you got,
That's the Constitution.
Yeah,
That's
I'm pretty pro Second Amendment, man.
That's the Second Amendment.
I went to the
Talking
range.
about-
I saw the picture. I went to the range a couple months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know you don't want to get rid of yours, but
No, I need mine, man. I gotta keep
But
these.
there should be restrictions because it goes back to what we said about free speech. Like that's another thing that I think people misinterpret about the Constitution. Like when that was first built, it was like what you fire 1 or 2 shots every 60 seconds, and now it's like people can just obliterate a whole block within 30 seconds. And I think that's the misunderstanding is like there should be some restrictions on maybe the capability of weapons or the access to it. And that's what's crazy to me. Not even going to the capability. I think the access piece. It's like, I mean, if you don't want a person that is a sex offender, like if you're able to limit other people in society, why can't you limit other people in society as it relates to their access to a thing that can harm someone? You don't want to have a pedophile around a child. I don't want to have someone who is bipolar. Just not even to make it sound like I'm being critical is more of an example, or someone that has any kind of condition where it's like they might not be the safest person to have a firearm. I think that's something we should at least begin the conversation. And I think that was something that I think is missed. It's like it's made to be so extreme. Like, and not to say this is how you feel, LA, but I think that's what people that are gun enthusiasts believe. It's like the minute we start talking about guns, you're going to take my guns, as opposed to realizing maybe it's just, just coming up with, somewhat of a middle ground.
Yeah, I think it's profitable. War is profitable, right? You get people scared. You tell them that there's an enemy against them. They're gonna buy guns. I don't know if you guys have seen defense stocks. I don't know if you guys have seen
Yes.
gun stocks lately. They're
Yes.
going through the roof.
Sold out.
Yeah, I
Yes.
think a larger question is, what if we took the resources that we use to develop these technologies and put them towards technologies that bettered ourselves, like some of these houses that Larry's talking about for women who are facing domestic abuse and things like that. It's like, where are we diverting our attention to, and why? We have an unlimited military spending budget, unlimited. No one cares how much we rack up. The Pentagon will just lose money and stuff like that. No one bats an eye. But you start talking about making the world a better place, and people are like, "Hold up, buddy," like hold up. And so,
right. Like it's almost like if you take this wave that we're on right now, where people are in this mindset of like, hey, we can make this place better, right? And you were the leader in that, and people started to believe in this idea of these human truths. Like, these are the things that all humans deserve, right? And if you started to just push that, and all of your money and your spending was like put behind that stuff, like, I feel like if you just made the world better and people just realized that resources weren't scarce and stuff like that, then you would be less scared of like foreign attacks and stuff like that, right? It would take some time, but it's like, why not just heal everybody? I know it's never going to be like a picturesque thing, but like, why be like combative? Why not try to be part of the solution? Right?
It can improve. Just because you don't have perfect doesn't mean that it can't improve. So if everyone's working more rapidly toward that improvement, we'll get toward that direction faster, that end of the spectrum faster. You know what I mean?
I saw an interesting tweet where a guy was talking about like what's the difference, and he was using Columbus as an example. Like, what's the difference between like Columbus City and Upper Arlington? Is it that they have more police there to keep things safer, or is it that everyone there has good careers, able to provide for their family?
Hey, Lawrence, I think we lost you, man. You might need to reconnect the Wi-Fi.
Bros, no.
It was struggling. I was like, hold on, is anybody else here?
I picked up what you was putting down though, man. I think that's the exact point, right? Like, we're more so nervous about like, oh, people are going to come into our neighborhood and try to take our stuff, but it's not even that. Like it's more so like these neighborhoods are safe because there's economic opportunity there and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
And if people have stuff, what do they need yours for?
Exactly.
Right.
People are educated.
That's true. That's facts.
If you have money to get your own stuff, you don't need to rob somebody. I don't need to run up in your house. I have my own. I can provide for my family. I don't need to, do something unethical. So it's like, when you give people the right opportunities, when you give people opportunity to, work for a living and provide for their family and stuff, it's like, they don't do all the criminal activity stops. It lowers by itself. So taking the money maybe that's not put into the police force and reinvested in our community to make sure those opportunities are there. I think that's what everyone's kind of saying, right? Like, maybe that's the route we start moving towards.
Not balancing the scale, put the resources where they actually need to be, as opposed to just having them allocated, like to Ryan's point, where it's like defense is an unlimited check, but other areas where it's like nutrition, education, it's like, why are we fighting? Why are we paying teachers so little? I definitely feel you.
Well, go ahead, that's a systemic issue too, just because of the whole property tax as it relates to education thing. Like, the better your area, the safer it is, the higher your property taxes, the more that goes to school. The better the schools are, the more money that comes into the value of your home as a result of living in that neighborhood. And so it's just cyclical. Whereas, on the other end of the scale, it's kind of the same thing. It just kind of stays stagnant because the less money that is there, the less money for education, less people want to move there, lower the home values go. So we have to fix that too. And I think, we have to really look at how we're allocating our resources and ask if these are the right places, like what we're currently doing. And I don't think that's the case.
Yeah.
I mean, the biggest rub is that there's so many big industries that are built up around that institution, right? So it's like, in order to actually put money where we should be putting it, you got to look at these institutions and be like, all right, Raytheon, all right, big defense companies, what are you really doing?
Like at this point, what are they even building? We have nuclear bombs. You know what I mean? Like what are they even building? We have planes that like evade radar. We have drones. We have aircraft carriers as large as cities with all kinds of planes on them. What?
And while we just sitting in a negotiator, pay them $100,000,
What do
and
we
they go
even
talk to
need that
Kim.
stuff for?
Go talk to Putin.
Right.
But I think it brings up something too, is that like, if you fix the scale, man, and like we have, I don't know, and it goes back to like the whole the planned obsolescence and all those things. Like a lot of industries are based on just providing us a service to help us out, but not heal us. I mean, almost most industries, like if we're healed, if we don't need to rely on these things, if we don't need to rely on prison, if we don't need to rely on fast food, if we don't need to rely on those things, like it would drastically alter things. So it's almost like everything's keeping us up just enough, but not actually making us, be able to thrive, which is almost sad. Feels like.
Yeah. And man, sorry, my fault. Just like another interesting thought I had about that, Mike, is like if you have a castle, you build a moat around it, which like, let's build up our defenses. But at a certain point, man, it gets kind of ridiculous to keep digging that moat and going further and further out. It's like once you have the moat, there's, lower return on it the more and more you build. So at some point it's worth it to just like stop, like
Well, how America polices its citizens, we also police the world that way. So your point is like, how many more rockets do you need? How many more boats do you need? How many more guns do you need? Because then you're just more likely to be like, all right, let's use them. Why not? We got them sitting around here.
I think we sell them. I think we sell them though too. To be honest, I don't know how many people realize how much money America makes off selling firearms.
We give them to other countries and stuff.
We
like,
give them to other countries.
And
so.
they use them against
Israel,
us.
we give them, our allies and stuff.
The whole Iran-Contra thing, like
we hook our allies up big time with the guns and the missiles and the planes and the helicopters. You know what I mean? So yeah, y'all seen the movie War Dogs?
Yes, I have
heard about.
And so like that whole industry, that whole side of like war. Somebody had a comment earlier. War is big money, man. Like as far as like just stimulating economies, there's a lot of reasons I can see it. It's kind of sickening when you think about our military spending budget. And there's so many other programs like education, like, infrastructure, just community programs. And it's just our police forces and our military just get so much money.
And the thing is, it's not even money to help those guys when they come back, when they're done making that sacrifice. They come back, they expend all kinds of their life and their resources. They miss out on family. They miss out on, living amongst peace, and they signed up for a noble cause. There's someone that's willing to die for a cause, I appreciate that. But we can't take care of these guys when they come back. Like, I think that's another way to look at it.
Yeah, everybody gets so mad about the flag, but man, look at how they treat the veterans, especially here in like LA. That's a big deal. It's like, hey man, go take a knee with the veterans down there, on Memorial. It's like they could use a little help too. You only care about them when they're fighting in the trenches when they come back, which is almost makes it like, how do you even buy into that? Like people that are so patriotic, that pretend to be patriotic. And then another thing to that point too, I had a guy on Facebook pop up the flag whole thing again. It's like, and I wanted to post, I really don't get into it just because I think, as we were having these conversations, I realized with my voice is that, and that's why I want to propose, Ryan, I'd like to get on some of those conversations we're doing with people because I don't want to be too strong, but that's how I feel. I really don't care what anyone else's opinion is. Do what you need to do. But I think, I might come off a little bit strong, but I wanted to tell him, like, if you feel that strongly about, the service, the military, you should go serve. Like, if you're like, and that's not as a knock, or like, I know people take it normally like, you're like, oh, go do this, like leave the country. But that's I took it as like, it's a compliment. If you have this much passion for it, bro, you need to sign up. Like, you're who we need in the military. Like, think about for real. Like, if you really defend it to this level,
we need you to be the 5-star general, man.
Right, go get that.
Yeah, Mike, we lost your sound again.
Yeah, no, I feel you, man. The hypocrisies are crazy out there, man. When you really start to break down the issues that people are talking about, I'm like, hold on, man.
It's doublethink, man. It's straight from the book of 1984, man.
Can you hear me again?
Yep, we got you.
When it's like, because again, last night after that Justice and Mercy was the thing I kept thinking of was like, whenever before all of this, I feel like growing up, if I pointed out anything, or if anyone pointed out things that were bad about America for black people, oh, just leave. I mean, they said the same thing to Kappa, and they go, oh, you don't like it, just leave. And again, that same analogy. You love the military so much, just join. You know, it's like.
Right.
Can you imagine if your wife said that to you? Like you guys got in a disagreement, and she's like, "Oh, you know, if you don't like it, just leave." You know what I mean? Like you just never worked through anything.
Right.
Like what kind of relationship is that? Like, you know?
Yeah.
For some reason, that's a common rebuttal for minorities. You know,
Mm.
I'll just leave. You know, when my internet might kick out. Can you still hear me? Sorry.
Yeah,
We got you.
Okay.
Yeah.
When like Trump was talking about how he was the most criticized president since Abraham Lincoln. Did anybody use that rebuttal? Just leave then. Go out, get out of America. You know what I mean? Like,
Just
Man, my hope
It's
is
like,
50 years from now, he won't even be remembered. That's my goal, man. I hope he falls into one of those ones where it's like, who? What was his name? What happened during that time?
Did y'all see those Republicans for Biden ads and stuff like that? Those Republicans against Trump ads. Yo, they was going hard. Honestly,
they're hardcore constitutionalists, man. They're like, this guy is fucking up the Constitution. We really need someone else in there just to even stop the bleeding. You know what I mean? That's how they feel at this point.
Bro, if you go to their stories pages, bro, it's like honestly, I couldn't even scroll all the way to the bottom. But there's a whole bunch of people just doing their video like, honestly, I voted for him in 2016, but I'll never vote for him again.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
That should be funny, bro.
Yeah.
So y'all think people jumping off ship?
I think a lot of people are, man. A lot of people see voting for him as a mistake. I think he promoted these values that aligned with their team, the Republicans. You know, he's like, you know, he's on our team, so I'm going to give him a go because the opposite is, you know, something I don't necessarily agree with. And I think it was kind of a forced choice, which is one of my criticisms of the two-party system, you know. But anyhow, I think a lot of people have some regret for going with him and realizing that he's putting on a reality TV show and he may not be the real deal, you know.
Well,
It's crazy they couldn't see that, but I'm like, okay. You know, like, you know, like, you're like, why did it take all this for y'all to see that? Y'all didn't see that shit from the beginning? Like,
well, didn't you say
he had a TV show called The Apprentice. He literally was a fucking reality TV star.
But they didn't want him for that. Like, isn't that what you said, Ryan? Like, they only picked him because he was like the best worst option.
They thought he was like a caricature, like a good caricature of like the person they wanted. But it turned into this view in the minds of Americans that, oh man, he's this big businessman, and so, you know, maybe he can turn America around. And so it like backfired, and like the producers were
like
talking
rebranded him.
Yeah, it rebranded him because he was coming off of a lot of failed businesses and kind of like, you know, became not really a big name in the 90s. And then he started, you know, doing this apprentice thing. And then he started criticizing Obama. And that kind of just snowballed from there, man.
So I think that Apprentice was a big platform for him, for sure.
Yeah.
Man, I wanted to bring up something that's related to the protest, but I know we lost Lawrence, but it was something that happened in Ohio was, man, they killed the girl. Like, and it goes back to like Waco and all these things about tear gas, but there was this 22-year-old Ohio State graduate who was tear gassed. Her name was Sarah Grossman, and they killed her. And you know, and then they tried to come out and say she had asthma, and people had to come out and defend, like, no, she didn't have asthma. So it's crazy. I didn't know if y'all had heard about that happening around the area, and then two, just kind of wanted to see what y'all think about the general state of the protests and, like, you know, the direction and everything.
I can go first. I think I have two thoughts. The general protests, like, I think sometimes obviously you could do peaceful, you could do kind of the more riot protest style. I think both have been deployed, obviously, throughout this. I think they both can lead to similar outcomes. I think the more riot version, I think, unfortunately, like from a local and like probably city, like economic standpoint, I think there's a long road to recovery a lot of times in those areas. For a lot of businesses, a lot of times business won't come to those areas for a while after riots. So from that standpoint, I worry about some of the longstanding negative economic standpoint impacts of some of the, you know, wider standing riots. I have been liking the collective peaceful riots though that have been happening throughout the country in solidarity. I think it's one of those things where I was talking to a white colleague of mine, and he's like, it's just not the same where someone that you don't even know across the country gets murdered and you feel something for that person, right? And what is that? How do you explain that? Um, versus, what others may experience. And I think that kind of goes and ties into some of the bigger picture about um, why certain people choose to react and riot one way versus the other. And I think I think it stems to like how disenfranchised you feel like you've been. And I think there's that Martin Luther King quote, like riots are like the voice of the unheard or something like that. So that's just my thoughts on that.
Yeah, man. I very much understand the
You might be
anger.
muted, Pelt. Oh, my bad. Go ahead, Ryan.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
Pelt was trying to.
I very much understand the anger associated with the riots, though I don't like, what happens as a result. I think it does fuel a lot of division because it gives people that pivot that they're always looking for,
Mhm.
but the rioters, and so I kind of think it goes back to that concept that we were talking about a little bit earlier. Like you kind of have to police your own people and be like, hey, like I can understand why you're angry. I get it, but maybe this isn't the right way. So that's kind of how I feel about it a little bit. I think it's sad that that girl died. I think that's terrible, man. And they don't use tear gas in war. Like you can't use it in war in the Geneva Convention. So I'm not sure
You're on
why our
citizens.
own government is using it on us. I think that's a violation of the Constitution, um, and I think that's terrible. So I feel just as strongly about that girl as I do about George Floyd for different reasons. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So that's terrible to me.
Man,
Well,
go ahead. Go ahead, Mark.
well, and it tripped me out because honestly, to be brutally honest, when y'all kept bringing up Candace Owens, I had no idea who she was, and I just happened to randomly see a video on Facebook, and I
Keep it
was
that
like,
way.
yeah, I was like, all right, let me watch this video. It was like 15 minutes, and already that's like, ugh, I don't know if I can do it. And I basically popped it on, and I did 5, but then I got the gist of it. And granted, you could be like, okay, you didn't do all of it because she had one good point, but it was like how she was trying to get there. I couldn't agree with her on. Was that basically that George Floyd is being martyred through this whole situation, and that maybe he wasn't the best person. And she kept trying to throw the disclaimer, oh, he doesn't need to be murdered, doesn't need to be murdered. And it's like, well, then why bring it up? It's like that's the only thing that really matters that anyone's ever talking about is that he shouldn't have been murdered. The fact that he is or is not a good person really is almost, I think we would all probably agree, is a moot point. Was Dylan Roof a good person? Like, who cares? He massacred 9 people. It's like, I don't care how he treated his mom or his cat or things of that nature. And I guess the thing that was tough about it was that it made me, like, as I saw that thing about that girl, Sarah Grossman, it made me think, like, yeah, George Floyd was the name that started it all. But dang, that's beyond me that Columbus police murdered this woman. Like, in defense of her, like, people are getting harmed protesting police brutality. And it's almost like, I think that's almost as big of a story, if not what, broke out the riots and protests. It's like, they're still doing it. Like, y'all saw how they did the 75-year-old man and then how the 57 officers resigned from that task force. It's like, they should be fired. It's like, y'all are cowards. Like, I don't know. I'm going on a tangent, but it's just crazy to me that, like, not only is what sparked this problematic, what's still going on, I think, is problematic with how the police are even handling it.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think that it highlights a lot of the injustices and kind of the differences that exist amongst the different local police departments, right? I think some are handling it correctly. You know what I mean? You taking it on the chin, taking that critique, If I worked in a big industry and we was doing things the wrong way and we was like, we got to change it up. All right, cool. I'm going to take it on the chin. You know what I mean? But in terms of like the overall protests and, how those go, it was a really good episode of 538 Politics, and they were just talking about some of the historical references, and they talked about how in the 60s they rioted for or they kind of protest for a long time, you know what I mean? And it, some of them kind of culminated in things being passed and everything like that, but it almost seemed to be like a necessary shift. And they almost started to talk about it as like it was a rebuke to the system overall. It wasn't just this one instance, right? That this one instance just kind of kicked off something that was already like brewing. Because honestly, I think a lot of it is a rebuke of Trump, right? And the ideals that he has, these ideas that he's pushing. Like, I think that's truly what it is. And, but I'll be interested to see how these things kind of culminate. And that's why I said earlier that I'm cautiously optimistic because you see how those things kind of ended up. Some good things, a lot of bad things as well. So, I mean, I'll be interested to see how this one kind of turns, but these are markedly different because of the makeup of the crowd. You know what I mean? If you think about white kids holding their parents accountable, that is the way that you solve it from the inside out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's a different level of protesting at that point. So
Yeah.
we'll see. This one is different because you can't just wiggle out of this one and keep pouring hate on it. Like, this is one where you're going to have to face this one head on. Are you cool with racism?
I think that was an interesting call out that you had, man, because one of the things that keeps getting said back to me was, what are they so mad about? The cops got charged. And I'm like, whoa, that's not what this is all about. This is the straw that broke the camel's back. You know, first of all, there are a lot of bigger issues at play. It's just the fact that this one was televised for us and shown to us. And it was just like a terrible sign of like, wow, this is representative of all that is bad. You know what I mean? And I think it freaked people out to see a man die on television with a man's knee on the back of his neck with no regard for his life whatsoever. I think that tweaks people out, man. And so it's not just a one event thing.
Like, imagine if Breonna Taylor's event was captured on
I
film.
know.
Because that story is still one that, like, I don't even know how we
That
didn't
blows
hear
my
about
mind.
this. Yeah.
That one. Every day I wake up and I think, man, I can't believe it. Because
Ran up in her house, right?
Yeah, they ran up in her house and shot her 8 times. I'm like, all these are bad. I'm like, that one is really bad, man. They run up in your, and it almost is kind of like the one in Dallas last year.
Was that
the homie was just chilling. Yeah. What dude was just.
Yeah, the
He
Breonna
was
Taylor
just in
one is
his
so
house,
bad.
and she could. Both of those are, man. People running in your house, shooting and executing you, and the worst thing that happens is somebody gets fired. There's no charges. Like, she wasn't a criminal. She was regular, EMT, I think. I mean,
and they tried to charge her boyfriend.
Yeah, and then they had to go rescue her boyfriend that shot at people that bust in their house that were undercover cops. It's like, what is going on? How is nobody charged? How are these people just fired?
And the crazy thing is, it shows a blatant disregard for life, because they just go in your house. You could have kids sleeping in the other room.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. You could just they just go in your house spraying. It's like, really?
Some of the neighbors said that their gunshots came into their house or to their unit. It's like, are y'all kidding me? Well, like, if that was any citizen, that would have been you. I mean, you would be for murder and all type of other stuff, man.
Attempted murder for the person in the unit sleeping next door. Attempted murder on them or something like that because they was in the room over there. You know what I mean?
Everyone in the building.
Yeah, like, that's what happened.
In a police chase, they're not supposed to shoot into moving cars for that exact reason.
Right.
The collateral, which is crazy. Like, and it's morbid. But going back to Breonna, it's like, imagine dying that way too. Like, think about the trauma that is going to be on that community. He lost his significant other. He was in a fight. I don't know how he didn't die. Like, it blows my mind how he lived through that. Like, imagine like waking up in the middle of the night and have like that. I mean, and again, it's morbid, but I can't imagine dying in that way. Being woken up to gunfire, like probably frantic, going around him, returning fire. Maybe she was firing, and it's like, there's no way he's gonna be okay. There's no way the people in that community are gonna be okay, and we're just gonna be on to the next. It's just. Yeah.
And it's just every year we see some stuff like this where it's how many different times where somebody gets killed on the circumstances. And I think people finally just woke up and said, okay, we just had the Ahmaud thing. We just had people, jogging for that to, demanding justice. And we just got people arrested. And here we go again. There's 2 other scenarios that pop up while we're in quarantine, while, violence was at an all-time low. And somehow we're still killing Black people for nonviolent, quote unquote, offenses sometimes, or public lynchings by people that aren't law officers anymore. So it's like, it's just all this stuff where I think it just culminated, like Larry said, culminated, and people are just like, the whole system overall, it's flawed. Like, we had a protest like this just to get charges. If the video wasn't there, what would have happened? Breonna Taylor still hasn't been charged. So yes, it's everything. We just had, and I'm glad people came together for it. Initially, I think we'd all kind of been skeptical about what some of the methods in the protest, but I mean, look at what's happened. We're taking down monuments now, the Confederate monuments. I think they said the military officially banned also. I'm like, which is crazy to me. Like, how is that now just happening? Like,
right? Why is that even a thing? Right.
Like, yeah, but here we are, 2020.
That is wild. Like, why is that even a thing?
Yeah, like why did it take so long for that to happen? But another thing, like they were saying, one of the big music companies said they're gonna stop labeling black music as urban. Like, yeah, that should have been done years ago. You know,
Right.
these buzzwords that, so a lot of change is coming from this. We still need to go further, but it's proven that this method has worked. None of this stuff was happening when we were trying to do it peacefully with Cap, or I mean, it's happening now because people are forcing it down your throat and saying you need to do something, or we're not going to support you, or we're going to make sure your businesses are still locked down. Like, either get on board or you got to get out the way.
Yeah, I mean, even like honestly, I definitely would say it was tough for me to kind of digest the idea of looting, right? Because especially in certain neighborhoods, it kind of pissed me off if I'm being honest, man. They looted
Me
like a
too.
piece, like it's the neighborhood joint right up the street that I go get my groceries for and shit like that. And y'all broke in there and wanted to go steal liquor and shit.
It's
You know what I
stupid.
mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's like, my
that's
nigga,
true.
like, where we gonna get groceries? Like, where we gonna eat? Like,
They're not
honestly,
thinking like that.
grandma's gotta pick up grandma's gotta pick up their medicine and stuff like that, bro. Like, that's not helping. You just opportunistic. So those opportunistic guys, I'm not cool with that. You know what I mean? But like, I mean, I feel like it was just kind of some of the repercussions that happened from the overall system. So I'm like, I can't necessarily fully blame you and not blame the system. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I
so
think
it's
was
it's
it
it's,
one of
it's a
y'all
tough
that said it,
debate.
or if something I saw in a video where it was like, well, I think maybe actually it was you, Lawrence, that said it. Was something that like, yeah, it's true. Because again, I think I had more of a, I don't know, I don't want to use the word pro looting opinion, but it's like it's also a byproduct of why do we live in a country that's so poor that people are like, oh shoot, during all this civil unrest, I can go out and have a come up from it. Like, why is that?
Right.
Like, why is that even a way that people feel like they needed to act themselves in that way? Maybe you didn't say it, but I remember someone saying that recently, and it's a very good question. It's like, yeah, I think there was different levels there was the protesters, there was the rioters, and there was the looters. But why did they even feel the need that they had to do that? Like, why do we live in a society where that was even something where, because you're right, it's like, heck, the Target ones, I could care less. You running up on corporate America, they got insurance. The mom and pop local thing, you harming your own community. I think there are some differences to it.
I
Uh,
agree. And
yeah.
and I was with Larry, and Ryan, I know you remember we was on that convo where he sent the video of the guy in Minneapolis like the day after, and I mean, it looked like anarchy, man. As far as what they had did to the block, a couple schools, libraries, and stuff. And my initial thought was the same thing. It's like, hey, man, this isn't the right way. There has to be a better way for us to make change and stuff. But it feels like, unfortunately, we have to go burn up our own community to make change, which is a problem in itself. We should be able to do this constructively in a more legislative, but people weren't listening to us when we kept bringing it up. It was
Never
always the
forget.
wrong time. It was never
Never.
the
Yeah.
go ahead,
Never
go ahead.
forget the conversation could have started with Kaepernick, man.
Yeah, it
Never
was always the
forget that the
wrong time.
conversation could have started with Kaepernick.
It's always the wrong time. You always want to turn it to something else, and like that's America's fault. He clearly said what he was standing for, or protesting and kneeling for, and y'all didn't want to listen. Y'all wanted to turn it into something else, and now people want to listen. We burn it out. And it's unfortunate. Hopefully, we can learn and actually start listening to voices when the peaceful protest does happen in the
do y'all
future.
do y'all think this is the equivalent of like the Me Too and Time's Up for race? Like, maybe again, like, is it comparable? Like, do you think that this might be that thing that pushes it into that motion where it's going to become that type of moment? Because people are getting caught up, like the dude that harassed that little girl putting up signs, like the
Great
guy
question.
with the bird watcher. It seems like action is happening quick. So I'm just curious. I want to pose that to y'all. Do y'all think this is like the Me Too Time's Up on racism?
From what I've seen on Facebook, as kind of point of reference, I have personally I think it is because I've seen a lot of people. Ryan, there's another girl named Ashley Pryor who I guess went to one of the Westerville schools, just kind of sharing their stories about racism that they encountered throughout their life. And some of the stuff is so subtle, but it's crazy where people actually feel empowered to bring those stories to these type of platforms now. Whereas a lot of times it's so touchy. You would just, I mean, if this didn't happen, you would never feel, maybe Ryan might, but most people wouldn't feel comfortable ever touch upon this or trying to heal from it. So I feel like it's been a chance for people to come to grips with things and really rationalize it, and also bring it to the forefront, and hopefully it's sparking that change for some of the people that were perpetrators, that hey, this does exist, this is how it happens, this is what you need to look out for, this is what you need to confront with yourself, your children, other generations, or anyone around you. And hopefully this is the thing that springs that change. And one point I want to say is I don't know if y'all have noticed some of the colorism stuff that's happening. To me, that's been a big takeaway for us as Black people. The girl mentioned it today. And she was a senior, graduated. She went to grew up all of her life through Worthington schools, and she was talking about not only racism but also some of the colorism stuff that happened to her because she's dark skinned, probably about my complexion. And she was saying people used to call her blackie, people used to make fun of her, people used to say, "Oh, you're the white, whitest Black girl I know," stuff like that. And we gotta be honest with ourselves in our community and say, "Hey, we need to get rid of all that." I mean, that is detrimental. Like, you got people growing up here in the suburbs that are looking for Black people to help them out, and sometimes we're making it worse in some of these cases. And
yeah, man, it's like the whole term of like Uncle Tom and stuff like that. Like, it just seems like these are words and concepts designed to put down anyone who just like thinks differently.
Yeah.
Just one quick point on the Uncle Tom thing. If you actually look at Uncle Tom, it's actually Sambo is the person that is who we think of as Uncle Tom, the person that kind of is like bootlicker type. The person's name in the story of Uncle Tom is actually Sambo, right? Uncle Tom was actually a good, upstanding dude, right? That was actually kind of more in the Black community. So like, if somebody ever uses like the word like Uncle Tom, it tells me that they're not actually in tune enough with like what it actually means. Like, I don't know why it went to like Uncle Tom, but the guy in the actual character is actually like a good, upstanding dude. It's the Sambo.
Not an insult, actually.
Who's exactly. I've never, I don't know why it went that way, but yeah, sorry to mess your point up, but I think
I don't know. That's
the
a
distinction.
That's even even more enlightening, I think, in this situation is because people don't even know what they're even saying.
Exactly.
Yet they're using it as a pejorative term. So it's like,
exactly.
Well, why try to put people down? Yeah, the colorism thing was interesting. I thought it was interesting that she said, as a result of that, she tried to overcorrect with these tropes and things that are stereotypes that we were fed in society, and then got called other names. Like, oh, why are you acting so thuggish? Why are you acting so whatever the words that people use? But I'm like, man, like, I think that there's some commentary there in terms of why did she think that those were the stereotypes? Like, why are those the stereotypes and stuff too?
We box each other in sometimes, man. It's like we can't be intelligent, but also still be Black. We can't, we can't try to be in the community if we grow up somewhere. Oh, you're not, me. Oh, you're not from here. You don't know. You know what I mean? It's just like
white. Where your grandma live?
Yeah.
Where your grandma live?
Bro, they in that book, they had this example about like I think he was talking about like anti-intellectualism, but essentially Cal Berkeley got rid of affirmative action in terms of like you needed this in order to get in, right? So they lifted like the SAT scores, right? So it was like just even across the board. So the Black people that were coming in, the new class that was like, hey, we didn't abide by the standards. We were just like, hey, we were just the smartest ones, so we got in. They were like, man, when we got there, we were looking forward to joining like BAT2, all of these Black organizations and being a part of those and stuff like that. But when they got there, the people was almost like not welcoming to them, right? Because they felt like they was like, trying to be white and stuff like that instead of embracing them, right? And they were like, man, it kind of hurt me to be like, man, this is my people, and I want to be a part of this community, but they wasn't allowing for us to because they felt like we thought that we were better than them, but we didn't. You know what I mean? Like, it's stuff like that is harming of the community. You know what I mean?
That's happened to me a lot growing up, man, just because of the schools that I've gone to, private Jewish school for elementary school, and then, mostly white community in Worthington for middle school and high school, and then Butler University was, private liberal arts school in the middle of Indiana. So as a result of that, I would face that from different people I'd encounter. Oh, you think you're better? Oh, you go to this, school or whatever. Oh, you talk white, or you don't even know what it's like and stuff like that. I'm like, I'm still Black in America. Like, this is just the path I chose. Do I have to represent everybody? I think that's like a problem too, man. We I don't know. I think that's an issue as well. Grouping people
crazy,
together.
Man. It's complex too. Because depending on what circle you in, it could be different type of it. Colorism or discrimination. If your own people, they make you feel uncomfortable. Sometimes I I've heard it like if you don't know certain black references, movies,
Right,
you know what I mean, stuff like
right,
that.
right,
You know, it's like, oh, you don't know
right,
this, you don't play spades, or you know.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
you don't know how to
yeah.
play spades. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like,
right,
dang, like, can I play euchre too? Like, come
Yeah,
on, man.
where you
right,
been, man? Where you
right,
from?
Right.
How many books you got?
Mike, you off, Mike.
So
Man,
it's
Mike
just
might get so
crazy.
excited.
Y'all got
Well,
me now again?
yeah, I
yeah.
got you.
Okay. Well, no,
Saying
not
what
yeah.
school you from. I don't know if you all remember that. You covered there talking that Columbus stuff, and you from where they
Right,
tell like me, they're like, you ain't from no Columbus. Like, okay, I guess
right, right. You right. I'm from Westerville.
That's what I was saying.
You're
Like,
right.
where your grandma stay. Be like,
Bye.
I used to get that all the time.
But think about that. Don't that almost proves like we're reinforcing the negative stereotypes of what it means to be black. It's almost,
Right.
That's
the
what I'm
media
saying.
tells us that's what it looks like to be black, and it's like you almost hide from it. It's like, oh no, I'm not smart. Oh no, I'm using these words. I'm using this, and I'm talking this way. It's like that's sad. We almost are reinforcing it in our own community. But I wanted to hit y'all with something too that like kind of going back to this whole platform and like I'm trying to get there. I think I'm definitely gonna get there, and that's why Ryan, I truly mean it, man. You having these conversations with these random white folks that I don't know. I do want to engage because I think for me, the randomness of it all would make me feel more comfortable. If it's a white person I got a little bit of history with, I think it's different. There's gonna be some feelings attached to it, but I think I could be more unbiased and neutral with someone I don't know. But something that I wanted to tell y'all about is like we took a trip to Washington State like last summer, and I'll be honest, I think y'all know. So I'm not a thrill seeker. I'm not the most adventurous, like and things of that nature. Like I'm more of a grounded person, and it's like what I realized about myself, and maybe I call it paranoia. Maybe that's not the right term, but I don't need to be out here doing all these wild things. And I think it comes with part of being black in America that, that same thrill that some people feel by riding a roller coaster, by parasailing, hang gliding. I'll be real, man. The 2020 with a white wife and mixed kids, like I feel that same rush by walking outside the door every morning. I feel that same rush by driving on the 405 highway with a police officer go by you. And I think that's something that like, I think that needs to be heard is people like normal things that other people take for granted freak me the hell out. Like, and I'm sure you guys might have some instances like that too, where I think people need to hear that of like part of what it means to be an individual where, you see this and you respond that way. And like, I was an example where Isaac was like, oh man, the police should only be around white people. And I had to sit him down like, no man, look, like not all police are that way. Police are peace officers. They're supposed to create a sense of peace for you. They're not supposed to harm you. I think that's part of it, like us sharing our experiences, but also changing the narrative of what it means about certain things that are, that are reinforcing those stereotypes, I guess.
Yeah, honestly, Mike, one opportunity for you, man, and it does have a little bit of agenda attached to it, but I'm doing this thing where it's called Vote Save America, and essentially you adopt a state and you just make calls into the state, and you do kind of start off talking about issues that are important to them and everything, but ultimately you ask them to vote for Biden. But like it does give you the opportunity to like talk with a lot of people in like areas where it's like you might have different views. So I mean,
I'm open. I'm down.
I'll send you the training.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Because again, for me, I can interact better because I see some people post something online and it's like, it's hard when it comes from your own community where people are like, you have some level of relation to them. But I think if it's someone that has a different view and I just don't know them, I think that's a better open dialogue. And I know y'all talked about like the whole versus thing. Like if I was to throw it up, because even y'all mentioned like Jack and all them, like that blows my mind. Like to know people, like heck, to know my own in-laws voted for Trump, and it's like, I don't care what happened during his presidency. Let's look about what happened during the campaign and know that there were still people that felt like, why? Like it really, it's hurtful. And I think if they knew that experience, if they knew that generally, when I'm outside, like I'm always checking. I'm always like, when the whole running, like I just started running in my neighborhood again. And there's like a house that's being like literally with a mod, how you ran by and there was like, and it's just all these little thoughts. It's like, I'm basically, I guess what I'm getting at is like, as like a safety mechanism, like I got a compliment. The guy was like, man, you did so positive. And I was like reading this article that someone sent me after it. I was like, man, I'm so positive partially as like a self-defense mechanism. I don't want to come off as an angry, negative black man. It's like, I want y'all to be like, my light is so bright. Look at me, man. I'm one of the good ones, and it's like, as much as it was a compliment, it was also an insult in the sense of like, man, I got to be this way. I can't come off half-step and you got to see this polished, pristine product. If I give you something different, you're going to think I just belong in a cage or something. I don't know. I don't even know what I'm really going with that, but do y'all ever have those kind of feelings and kind of thoughts?
You gotta always be on your A game. Like, like you can't be caught slipping. Like, you know, in these meetings, like in these Zoom meetings, like mostly white people in the tech industry, it's like I can't be angry. I can't like, hey, hold on, what's going on here? Why are we doing this? You know, like I got to be really mindful how I interject in meetings, like how I bring up topics. It's for real.
What the hell's going on here? The angry black man.
LA, relax.
Yeah, but exactly. So I definitely feel your point. It's like the subconscious, like, and it wears on you. So after like a couple days of like work, I'm like, why do I feel exhausted? You know, why do I feel a little drained? You know, because I feel like you always gotta kind of, I don't want to say put on that mask, but like, you know, they ain't getting a 100% authentic El Dente LA. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? They ain't getting the El Dente. You know what I'm saying?
Who puts that voice on at work?
I feel like everybody, man. I feel like everybody.
Man, I can leave the best white voicemail you ever heard, man. They'll be like, man, who is this dude? I need to call this dude back.
Right.
Oh.
I ain't gonna lie. Did y'all see that video where the little white girl was calling out her parents and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Basically, she got like she going back and forth with her parents, like, no, like the statistics is not right, like this is not right. They're like, the dad is like, no, I've seen these people, they just want to be ghetto, like these people are animals and stuff like that. She's like, wait, you're calling them animals, like, and this is a white girl going back and forth with her parents. I'm like, you are a soldier, you know what I mean? You are a soldier, but like. When you think about it, like it really is a stereotype that they really think we're animals, and we're always working against that. Like we don't ever want to see us. Like we don't ever want to get to the point where you're like, oh, that's the animal side coming out of him, right? That's why you're trying to guard against that angry black man, because you know in their mind they think you're a beast. Like if you ever see some of the videography or like some of the imagery from like Uncle Tom's Cabin, like or some of that like those old videos,
old Disney stuff too. Like, have you seen how they used to portray, like black people in these old Disney cartoons?
That shit's scary, bro.
Modern music videos as well, I would argue, to be honest with you.
It's scary, man. Like it really brainwashes people into thinking stuff, and then how they justify when they meet someone like us is, oh well, they're different.
They're different.
That's the different type of black
That's
person.
the exception, right?
Yeah, that's not.
Right.
There's not a lot of people like that. That's just how they are. You know, that's how they grew up.
Yeah, that representation matters. I mean, we talked about that before, like in college, how you're meeting some people and it's like, and then all of a sudden you become the representative for all of African Americans. Like, well, what do you think? And I'll be honest, I think a lot of that's happened with this too, where like you get on those Zooms and everybody's like, oh, well, you know, does everyone want to just talk about how they feel? And again, that's my problem. Is like, if I
you be the only black person on there too.
Yeah, like, no, I don't want to give you the Ross. Like, one of the days they're talking about the rioting, and I almost lost it. I'm like, man, why do you think they rioting? And so I almost the third thing, like, man, I would have been out there. Shoot, take. You know, if I'm a single male out there, I might have been out there. You know, like, and it just, I don't think people get it. It's like they want you to be that just voice of reason, where it's like, all right, Dr. King, give us your love. It's like, man, I'm just a regular dude too. I stub my toe, I'm gonna get mad. You know.
Yeah.
Bro, it's crazy, bro. Like, I was literally on a call, and it was like, you know, I probably got 10 other coworkers. I think one woman is African American as well. But it's like, you know, you guys want to talk about what's going on? I'm just kind of dreading it.
I know.
That awkward
Like, 'cause I know they looking for the thesis, me break down, you know, slavery to now. You know, I'm like, I'm not, I just didn't want to do it, man, at all. You know what I mean?
Right.
So why they put us in that situations though? That's what's wild.
Tell me about all my experiences. I don't feel like doing it right now, guys.
Right.
It's tough, man. It's tough
Not
because
this Tuesday.
I know for me, man, in some cases, I feel like I'm like the only black person that some people know. And it's like, I do kind of want to be that representative, that model to show, hey, not all of them are what you see on BET or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, not all of them are what you see in the news. So at the same time, it's like, damn, it's exhausting. You know, it's like, man, that's
why, Ryan, please tag me in, bro. I'm dead
man.
serious. I really want to get on some of these. Like, I'm going to obviously be respectful and I'm obviously be myself, but I think I'm also not going to be diplomatic. I think that's one of those things where, you know, if everyone wants to talk about opinions, you are entitled to have an opinion, but no one has to give a shit about it. And I think that's what I think people have to realize. Like, you can absolutely have 100% have your opinion, but know that I just might not care about it. And I might be able to have a conversation with you and we might not ever get to the middle, but I think that's why what you're doing, Ryan, is so impactful, because it is about having conversations. Like, as much as I don't like them too, like, I finally did lean in and I'm like, man, look, that's what you think. This is what you see. Like, I think you do have to take the microphone, but I think the part that's messed up is that shouldn't be an expectation for us. it shouldn't be like, hey, we having this thing. Like, I don't know, Draymond said she had one where it was like they were literally forcing people to talk. It's like, okay, and now this person. Well, what do you think? And it's like, I plead the fifth. I'm not going in. Like, what if I just truly don't want to talk?
I mean, I will say this though, man. I feel like I've definitely kind of always been happy to, not necessarily happy, but I've definitely kind of owned that. You know what I mean? It's like not a lot of people got to this place where I am right now, and they kind of are leaning on me, and I am bringing the community with me. And I'm gonna let you know that, yeah, it's me, but I know a lot of other people that are just as successful. They speak, talk, look just like me. You know what I mean? So whatever representation you have, let's just go ahead and wipe that away, right? Because you may have never seen anybody like me, but let you know there's a ton of people out here that's just like me. You know what I mean? And yes, they pay some stuff in the media or whatnot, but you see how you interact with me day in and day out. You know what I mean? So whatever mold you're trying to paint, all people are like that. No, you got one case example right here that actually proves that wrong. So go rethink your mindset. You know what I mean?
And we have a network of people that not
It's a
just me. I
network
know a
of us.
network of people that I know just like that.
It's a lot.
That
It's
is
a lot
powerful
of us.
too. So
It's
that's
a
why I
lot
said
of
y'all
us.
been doing the Lord's work, man. And Morgan has done it with her coworkers, and I've heard them getting in deep stuff. I'm like, hey, well, yeah, you start work. What the fuck? Oh, you mom, like it's going down over there. But you know what?
Right.
Like they literally sent an email to her, sent money, raised money within their just like between them as coworkers. Um,
Mhm.
and it's based off the fact that she was educating them on some of the stuff she's been through, some of the stuff that Black people are going through, that in the situation now. And they were so enlightened by it that they just wanted to, and moved by it, that they wanted to help, they wanted to support. So to your
Mhm.
point, Ryan, Larry, it's like there is positive that comes out of that from sharing those experiences, and everyone's not comfortable doing it. I'm trying to get to that
Mhm.
point. I'm not, Mike. It sounds like me and you are kind of in the same boat, but it is a responsibility that we do have to start thinking about, especially now that we're getting older, kids and stuff are coming in picture. We want to start making sure we get that good information out.
No, I'm with you, and I definitely want to do it. And I think the only thing that I would say is more to be critical of it is that I think it should just be a choice. That's all I'm saying. It should be a
Yeah.
choice of like
Oh yeah.
who does and doesn't. And I feel like sometimes it's more of like, here, you giving the megaphone and you just got to speak. And it's like,
Mhm.
can I pass it
Yeah.
this time? Maybe I don't have my – because I still feel like personally I don't have my thoughts all together on all the things that are happening because it is so dynamic. And me personally, I think also just my personality, I think most people's words are – and again, I'm just going to be real. I'm just going to give it to you unfettered. I think most people's words are worthless. It's like, okay, I'm going to hear what you're going to say, but I'll follow your actions in 3 weeks, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. That speaks volume to me. I'll have a conversation with you, but then if you're the person that's like, oh, I got this going on, and then, oh, that, and then it's this, and it's like, oh, okay, that's great. And again, maybe that's a character flaw of mine, but it's just like I'm a person of such conviction and such vision that it's like I stay on a path, and it's like if people just want to talk for the sake of talking, I think I struggle with that. And I think that's, again, and I'm not saying that's a good thing. I think there's some positive and negatives of it, but I know that plays into me being that way. But I'm trying to be vulnerable, man. That's why I want to get in. I want Ryan to tag me in. I think, even with these, like I know I keep trying to pub it, like, oh, this is a podcast, because I guess I want to pose a question is that, do you guys think it's still valid for people to say, oh, I just didn't know, I didn't know that these sort of things were going on? Because I think some people are still, somewhat rely on that adage that they didn't understand how things were in certain areas, in certain communities.
Tough.
Yeah, that's a tough case to make in this day and age.
I think so. I think in a lot of ways it is. I think in some ways we do have to consider that, the reality of the situation is we only learned about MLK, Rosa Parks, and stuff like that in school. So if I'm someone who doesn't have a stake in it, why would I explore that even further? You know what I mean? So it's like maybe all I get is that little sample in grade school, and then I never really explore further. I exist in my bubble. So I think there are some instances of that. I think it's getting more, or I guess less and less excusable as time goes on with how easy it is to access information. I think at a
Yeah,
certain point you become willfully ignorant.
yeah, I think so. I want to agree because I think, like you said, that bubble, like for us on this call, in order to get to a certain point where we are in our lives and career, we can't be in a bubble. We have to be on these Zoom calls with people that don't look like us, talk like us, come from where we are, have these interactions on a daily, weekly basis, right? Throughout our lives, we have to polish ourselves. We have to know how to talk. We have to be able to code switch. We have to have these abilities to be able to be successful and navigate this shit. Whereas on the other spectrum, you know, I have plenty of white colleagues where I might be the only black interaction they have, and it occurs at work maybe, right, over a Zoom call, right? So
Mhm.
it's like to live in that bubble, to not have to have that burden. It's like what compels them to even take the time and energy to educate themselves, to seek out the information,
Mhm.
versus I have to by survival sake because I have to, but
Mhm.
for them it's just like they don't. It's like why do it? So I
They
think
don't get.
yeah, they don't have to. So I think for a long time, I think that ignorance will exist because there'll always be people who just live their lives in those bubbles unless they get to know people of different colors on a deeper level to get more invested into figuring out what are they struggling with, what are the issues they care about. And until that happens, I think it's just they don't have to worry about it. It's a great
Yeah.
privilege.
Yeah,
That's real.
I shot out a tweet the other day, and I was like, man, be patient. You know, it take a while to realize that you're waking up in the matrix. You know what I mean? It's a kind of an uncomfortable thing
Hmm.
when you first wake up in the matrix. It's like, man, it's like, hold on, like, so everything that I thought was true is no longer
It's
true.
been fake.
You
It's
Right.
been a
feel me?
lie.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
hold on, this is a lot. You feel me? Like,
yeah.
it takes time to adjust to the matrix. So it's like, you know, you got to be patient with these white people because it's like, look. Even some black people waking up to the, because like a lot of times black people haven't done their own history. You know what I mean? Like it's not like ask black people about redlining. A lot of people didn't know about that until recently. A lot of people just now doing their history, just now understanding that stuff. You know what I mean? So
And I'm
you
guilty
know,
of that too, man. You know, this recent stuff brought up a kind
Me
of a
too.
wave where I was like, man, maybe
me
I really
too,
need to analyze this a little bit
Yeah.
me
more, you
too.
know?
Yeah. Me too. You know, a lot of
Well,
stuff my pops had to put me on. Like, look, it's not just this. It's like, yo, there's been other systematic things that have been happening in the background that people just aren't conscious of. Unless you really pick up some of these books and stuff, you just will not know. It's not in any textbooks that we had in high school. You know,
Right.
Right.
this
And
is
I
all
can't
so
imagine,
new.
I can't imagine as, you know, say a white guy from a small town that I work, you know, 10 hours a day. I get home, I need to, you know, get dinner, I need to do all these things. I can't really see too much of a scenario where I'd pick up a Black history book. You know, I feel like it's just kind of, it's,
Right.
it's tough, man. And so I think people have to be active about going out and getting that education. I think you have to be intentional about the relationships that you have in order to learn and grow. And I think there's something
Mm.
wrong with the system that forces people to work 40 hours a week, you know, in order to survive. I think that's a big issue as well, man. You can't figure out
Yeah,
these complex issues. You can't read
yeah,
books. You don't have time to understand the world if
Yeah.
all you're doing is working on spreadsheets or stamping sheet metal and stuff like that.
well, that was the thing I wanted to bring up as it relates to that, like how some people are waking up and we're saying, okay, maybe they can't have that excuse. But what do you guys think about the difference of like, yeah, I can read a book or I can see a documentary or I can follow a tweet. But what about that just personal interaction? And what I'll bring it to is something that, you know, I want to kind of first pose it to Ryan because him going to Butler, I feel like was like a smaller ecosystem than maybe what we had at Dayton. And it's some family weddings that I've been to, like my in-laws, like Connor, Bert, and Lena, who are now married, who are my in-laws. I went, you know, when they got married, and then my brother-in-law Zach, when he got married recently too, and now she's got a cousin who's about to get married in August in like rural Illinois. And you know, I go to these weddings, people that I love and I care about that I think are down for the cause. Like Lena's pregnant and is protesting in Indianapolis, like you know, throughout this whole thing. But I go to their weddings, and this is not to try to out them. I love them and I care about them, but I think it's part of it where yeah, you can research and you can see it and you can look at it. But at their wedding, at Lena and Connor's wedding, there were there were two black people. And again, this is gonna sound weird the way I quantify them, but it was me, and then it was my older son Isaac and another biracial guy. So it was like, you know, so it was like two half black people and one full black person, and then at Zach's there was none. And I guess the point that I bring up on it personally, how I've experienced that personally, but do you guys think that there's some difference to that where it's like, yeah, I can read about the cause, I can hear about the causes, but if I'm not directly interacting with it, I think that's a big disconnect of it all too. If you're not in that, you know, personal touch to it, how do you really get it? I guess is what I'm trying to get at. What do y'all think about that? You know?
Man, I think maybe this is a good question to wrap up on because I've had a very similar experience as you, and I think maybe we need to like dive into this a little bit more because I think part of it is one, there's some people that just don't have people within their network. I've been to parties that have been 100% black. You know what I mean? There's just no white people around just because that's the nature of the situation. And so I think that's some of it too. The world is connecting a little bit more. We're getting out there a little bit more. And I think, man, maybe we have to look at it sometimes and say, hey, yeah, we want to be at the top of the mountain, but we got to start the journey of 1,000 steps with that one step. And maybe us showing up is the first step. You know what I mean? So I think that plays into it too a little bit.
You know what else I want to make sure we touch on, not necessarily today, but maybe next time, is just with the scenario with Mike, you and myself. Morgan's biracial. You all have your wives are different race than you. I'm just wondering with this whole situation that's going on, and not with you all having to divulge too far into personal details and stuff, but just how has this whole process been, kind of dealing with, everything that's going on. And then also, has there been any education, looking in the mirror type stuff that's happened on both sides, not just you, I mean, not just them, but, on your side? Because I just think that's an interesting dynamic where, a lot of people are in families like that now, where it's not just all black people and stuff. I mean, my kid's grandma is going to be white, the great grandma and their family are going to be white. So it's like, it's a bigger issue when you start, these families coming together. How is the information being shared, and what are some of these conversations that people are having?
Well, I'm happy to share it, and definitely, Ryan, I know we're kind of getting to time of everybody, but I do want to share, because it's interesting you say that, because it was just like maybe yesterday or the day before, is that, I think obviously y'all know, I know Ryan maybe probably knows it the least, but y'all know, Dre, y'all know my wife and like the type of person she is, and that's why it tripped me out seeing that girl that got tear gas, because like that would be her. Like if it wasn't for me and her being married and having these kids, like she would be that type of person. That's one of the things I love about her. But at the same time, I think the things that we all knew, and I recall having conversations since age 5 about the police, about being black, about all these things that she's just never had, and she's only had to start really having since we had kids. Because I think personally, we didn't dive into it too. And like something she was doing that I had to be pretty straight up to her, because I saw Ari's sister actually post something about like some famous black actress having a white husband, and like how we have to have these conversations. And like Dre would sometimes be having videos playing where it's like extremely inappropriate for Isaac to hear, like, someone like, being harassed by police or this, that, and the third. And he made a comment where he was like, oh yeah, it's only safe for white people to be around cops. And I had to be like, no, man, that's not true. The first job I ever wanted to be was a police officer. Their job is to serve and protect. Like I tried to explain what the profession is, and had to explain to her that like, it's okay for us and certain people of maturity to observe that content. But if you're 5 years old and you just hear or see that,
Wow, I didn't think
that's
about
distorting
that.
your perception. I don't want him thinking that that's the reality. I had to reshape what reality is for him.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I've had very positive conversations, man. A lot of growing on either side, a lot of things that were misunderstood that came to be agreements, actually, when you really dove into them in the ways that we see the world. So I think it's been eye-opening for me. And, perhaps we can explore, some of those conversations on a call coming up, because I know we like to do this. So, yeah, I think that's dope, man. I always appreciate getting to rap with you guys. It makes me smarter.
Yeah, and I got another agenda topic for the next meeting too. It's kind of on that topic, is in the current state of the world as a single man, the pressure to marry a black woman versus a white woman. Like, because I'm a single dude out here just dating. I'm like, man, I'm kind of choosing. I'm kind of like stiffing these white women a little bit. I'm like, I don't know.
It's a different time.
It's a different time.
That's real.
So
that's real. Can I swipe left or swipe right? You know what I mean? Am I swiping right? Can I swipe right?
And love who you love, man. Love who you love.
But I would like to hear your thoughts.
That's real, man.
All right, I'm about to
love in the era of Trump.
Yeah.
All right, man.
All right.
All right, man. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, man. We'll talk to you later.
All right, man.